Snooze.
Hello? Hello. Welcome to Thursday. Hope you're keeping very well. Today, friends, well, we're going to have a look at the configuration and the setup of Microsoft Flight Sim, some settings, what I do and what I use, the buttons that I press, and just a bit of a dive into the owl, you know, the thing, right? I mean, you know, for a lot of us, we've been using flight sims for a long number of years. Others kind of jumped on in 2020. Others just started with 2024. And we have options, of course, for the PC, the Xbox, and very recently, the PlayStation 5. So there's a bit, you know, that goes on. Now, what I plan today, well, some of this could be low-hanging fruit. You know, they'll be like, really, Merv? Duh, right? But some of it maybe will be new to you, and hopefully I can even explain some things. I mean, we hear these phrases, you know, Wasom, blasted. Well, do we actually know what it is and what it's doing, and what happens inside Wasom, right? Got very bright in here all of a sudden. So that's the plan, right? We'll see how we get on. We're also going to have a look at some VOR navigation when we do have the simulator up and running. Well, yes, we can fly via VOR, we can go the airliner stuff, but there is a fascinating way to navigate and to fly along when following VOR. And it's not done enough, and I say bring back the old way, you know. So we'll have a look at VOR navigation as well. And then later, we're only getting started. Then later, we're going to preview tonight's VATSIM fight. We're flying from Dublin to Brussels, and we need to get ourselves rehearsed, make sure our scenery is working, the aircraft is working, and we know all about the procedures as we fly out of Dublin, which is busy, across Europe into Brussels, which is also busy. So that is what the objective is today. Right. Put on the kettle, we're going to have coffee, it's going to be grand, we're going to ease our way into this. Yes, it could be early morning where you're watching, it could be very late at night, it could be daytime, or indeed it could be the afternoon. So wherever it is you're watching from, welcome, and we'll get started here now in a few moments. Right. I'm only messing. I'm actually going to play, you know, Roblox. But anyway, who's here, look? D. White, good morning. Top Gun Glenny, good to see you, buddy. Eamon 1973 has rambled aboard. Hope all is well, buddy. Let me see here now. DK Funfly, good morning. Spitfire RAF 100 is here in the chat. Hope you're well. Malky, top of the morning to you. MDA 009. Good to see you, bud. Hope you're well. Mac Vision is here. APU Inspector, good morning. Fierce Wolf says, why am I awake at 4 a.m? He's not fierce, he's just wolfy. It's good to see you, buddy. 98 Vulcan, good morning and good night. Alas, I lost my gaming rig in the shop to have cooling problems diagnosed. A deep clean and a BIOS upgrade. Woe is me. Hopefully be back for Friday night. You poor old devil. Hope they do a good job. Do you know what I mean? Corn Wolf, good morning. Hope you're well. I'm Pierce is here. Welcome. Happy Thursday. Commander Balosh is in the chat. Happy birthday to Commander Balosh. He's 77. You're great to see you. You're very welcome in. 105 streams in a row, Commander Balosh. Thank you very much. Now, Martel, good morning. Crafty Tigers is here. Hope all is well. Soaring AJH man, a happy Thursday to you. Just Roy is here. Hello, Snoozy Snooze. Good morning, afternoon. You're very welcome in. Good to see you. Schuller Pilot. Jesus. Alison Johnson, press buttons. Do you know what she's... Jesus. Ali, that's 1,000 subs to the channel. 1,000 of them. Jesus. Mother, lads, if you just got a tier 1 sub with thanks to the lovely Alison Johnson, well, do be sure to say thank you. 1,000 gifted subs, Ali. Jesus. Right. That's insane. Thank you very, very much indeed. What a ledge. Schuller Pilot, good morning. It's also Airac Day. Oh, good man, Malky. Brilliant. Schuller says, I'm in the new Tintin livery. A true work of art. Need to have a look at it, Murph. I'm afraid to fly that thing because they'll be like, Murph, what are you doing on the plane? Blinky, good morning. Education time. Yes, well, we'll try. One Foxy Bingo Gav is here, good morning. And then Ali, 1,000 gifted subs to the channel. Thank you very, very much. Great to see you. Now, let me see. AC, now, is it Bianca? AC Biancato? If I pronounce that right, you're very welcome in. I've butchered the name something fierce. I'm like, Biancato. You're welcome. Right, where's this now? Buttons again. Things, right? Lots of things we need to do. And we'll play it by ear, right? Captain Sickbag is here. Good to see you, buddy. Hope all is well. Is the sunny southeast nice? It's 7 degrees here in Tipperary and it's raining. Right, lovely, they said. A bit of rain. So it's all ahead of us now. Hanky is here. Johnny Mon, you're very welcome aboard. Good to see you, Johnny. Hope you're well. Yeah, we've a fair bit to kind of... it's an Italian name. It's fantastic. I hope you're well. Cambridge calling from Idle Cutoff. Hello from Tipperary. You're looking well. But yeah, it'll be a busy one here now today, lads. As I said, when we set up the sim, it is a fairly complex bit of software, especially when we kind of deviate away from the vanilla state. You know, we start putting in fancy hardware, fancy add-ons, sceneries, plugins, all the sort of jazz to squeeze every last bit of drop out of technical wowness when it comes to the sim. And when we do that, well, some things, you know, break or they just kind of, you know, shuffle your buzz sort of thing. So, well, we're here to try and see what happens, you know. The sun is shiny and the rain is dry. Great news, great news. Excellent stuff. Yeah, it's 7 degrees here. It's to get down to like 0 degrees. And the weather's gone mad. It's shagged, lads. That's it. The weather's shagged. But we'll see how it all gets on. It'll be grand. We're staying indoors where it's safe. Yes, away from all the loud noises and bad weather. We'll stay in. So stay inside. Stay inside. So anyway, on my system, I run, well, I have one copy of Microsoft Flight Sim. I do have 2 others, but I haven't used them in quite some time. I tend to use them as beta. So I have one on Steam and I have one in the Windows App Store, right? And of course, I have X-Plane installed as well. And then, you know, there could be 1 or 2 other games. I have a lot of software running. So over time, you learn, you don't want to spend all your time tinkering with the sim. But if you do spend a little bit of time, I'd recommend maybe once a month, just a little spring clean, see what's happening, have a look at things. And especially, you know, when add-ons are getting updated or when the sim update comes out, well, we need to go back and review some of the add-ons that we have. Also very important to realize, you know, when you put stuff into your community folder or you install it, well, if you don't use it, well, get it out of there because you don't need it. And it could be the case, you could have an add-on installed that's actually conflicting with something else. And these are things we really need to be careful of because the first thing we'll say is, the sim broke. But the sim didn't. Something broke the sim. And that's what we're going to try and dive into a little bit as well, right? But yes, it's agreed. It is. It's far too cold. Far too cold out there. We'll stay inside. Right, we'll come over to a couple of screens. We'll get started. A shout out to A. Crotty. Father Ted is the screen name because he put together a massive guide for a full setup of Microsoft Flight Sim. And I've read down through it. It's very, very detailed. It's quite good. So the notes that I have, there's a bit of stuff there from A. Crotty. Speak of the devil, there he is. Good morning to you, buddy. There's a bit of stuff that I have from Father Ted and a bit of my own stuff. And between the two of us, let's see what happens, right? Roy says, interesting stream. Let's hope we're learning something today. Yes, let's hope. You know, fingers crossed. Ali says, Murph, there is a lag behind, there's a lag being caused by Moza Cockpit and Chaseplane. So if you're getting stutters on force feedback, remove Chaseplane. Ooh, I wasn't aware of that. Now, sending too much telemetry via SimConnect. Okay, well, we'll look at that as well. Because when it comes to anything else that's trying to read or communicate with the sim using SimConnect, and a lot of things use SimConnect, you'd be surprised. Navigraph, LRM, Volanta, anything that's outside of the sim environment that's communicating to the sim, well, it's communicating using SimConnect or maybe FSU IPC, and they use like sim commands or, you know, LVARs and all this variables, right? So we'll have a look. Naughty Gnome is here. Good morning. So we'll start at the beginning, right, and see what happens. Patrick is here. Good morning. Hope all is well. So let's see what we can do. We'll jump over to this screen, and this will become our little, you know, office for today. As Willow How Much has rambled in. Good morning, Willow. Hope you're well. Muttley is here. Good morning. Hope you're keeping absolutely fantastically well, and it's great to see us. Happy Thursday. The weekend is almost here. Yeah, brilliant, right? And there's rugby on the weekend, right? Come on, Ireland. We're up against it. But yes, a magnificent DC6. Magnificent. It's just beautiful. It's just beautiful. So I have a whole load of notes, right? And we'll talk about the different things that we're going to do, right? So what we have here, the foundations, right? Where you get your sim from. People will say, is it better to get it from the App Store? Is it better to get it from, Steam? For me, there's no real difference now these days. Steam does have its advantages at times, but then again, the Windows App Store, I mean, I've never seen a performance or loading time difference between where you're getting the sim from. It hasn't happened, right? What can happen, especially with the Microsoft App Store, it mightn't load the sim. That happens quite often. And it's either we couldn't load the session, we couldn't get your latest cloud save. But Steam is connecting to the very same service, so it could happen on Steam as well, right? So these are things to watch. The very first thing for PC pilots, one of the most important things, where are you installing your simulator? Right, it's on your computer, Murph. We know that, but your computer has drives, and it's important to know what speed these drives are operating at. Right, so we'll start. Let me see over here. We have a lovely picture, of course, of a DC6. We'll drop that guy down. Here's our sim in the background. But if we have a look at a simple, here's your PC, right? And in your PC, you might have one, you might have two, you could have three drives in there, right? What we're looking for here is the fastest possible drive. And why that's important is your loading time is going to be affected. Other programs fighting for control, background apps, that's going to be important, right? And also security. All right. So if we're talking about, okay, look, I have, I've a 10 terabyte, external hard drive. Sure, I'll put the sim on that and I never need to worry about space. Well, yes, you could. But you need to be careful of the loading times. Just to give you an idea, right? A conventional hard drive, 5,000 or 6,000 RPM. It's sequential data. Just to give you some kind of background, it's between 80 and 120 megabits a second, right? The latency, not just for loading, but in the sim is going to be a high latency solution. The main menu load could take anywhere between 3 and 7 minutes, right? And what that leads to when you're flying, especially if you're using rolling cache, well, that could give you severe pop-in and also some stutters. And you need to be careful about this. If you have your sim spread amongst other drives, let's say, for example, you're using Add-ons Linker and you have your main sim on a fast drive, but then you're throwing your add-ons into a slower drive, that means the sim is now waiting for that data to be pushed across, which in a lot of cases creates stutters or pop-ins. It's just one of those things, right? If you're on a SATA solid state drive, that speeds things up almost 100%, right? You're talking up to 500 megabits a second in terms of speed. Your main menu load time, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, give or take. And it's relatively acceptable in terms of loading stuff in. So if you have your sim on one drive and then you horse in an SSD, away you go, you're absolutely happy out, right? But it still isn't the fastest. Then we look at the NVMe drives, which are technically SSD, right? But there's now two main generations we're going to look at. Generation 3 SSDs or Generation 3 NVMEs, for example, the Samsung 970 and all this sort of jazz, right? Well, they'll give you 3,000 megabits a second speed. The data transfers are blistering fast, right? That means you should be into your sim in about 1 to 2 minutes, and it's going to give you fairly smooth operation. The latest and greatest that we can now see, like the 990s and upwards, are the 4th gen NVMe drives, where they're somewhere between 5 and 7,000 megabits a second. They're going to have you in the sim 45 seconds to a minute, and that's optimal. For all add-ons, that's optimal. And now we've even faster. We're up to like 1,100 megabits a second speed. They are blistering speeds. And remember, we were chatting about this with Roy some weeks ago. There are settings that are being tested on the Windows Server operating systems that are actually lifting the restriction from Windows from slowing down these drives. A lot of the time, Windows is not utilizing the speeds available. Now, it's early days yet, but the early results are very promising. You're talking seconds offloading. Like, not just milliseconds, we're actually looking at seconds. And you might say seconds offloading. I don't mean loading of a main page or a menu. That could be seconds loading in aircraft, textures, weather, this kind of stuff, right? So as a rule of thumb, always aim to put your simulator on the fastest possible drive. If you don't have space on your fastest drive, move stuff out of there. Just move it across. And yes, you could say, well, I'll use cloud backup, or I'll do, cloud backup is fine. Like your OneDrive and Google Drive, they're all fine to operate. However, they are background apps. So you're creating a new problem now by introducing background apps that when you're in your simulator session, well, your PC is now using your sim, but it's also looking at files. So if you're trying to put stuff up onto a cloud, as in a cloud server, well, the PC is going to look at it. The Windows search indexer is looking at it. Defender is looking at it. And then whatever software or uptime is being used for all these data packets from a security perspective. So you're now creating another problem. So you need to be aware of that. Whereby cloud data is very, very handy. It is not ideal for your sim. It just isn't. By all means, if you're going to drag folders down and put them into, local storage, great, no problem. But if you're trying to run stuff that's spread across kind of cloud gaming, not good at all, right? Where is this now? Your Microsoft Flight Sim is on a 3400 speed. I guess that's good. That is good. 777, good to see you, buddy. Hope you're well. Stu Snape is here. Good morning. Where is this now? You've had both. You prefer Steam. Yeah. You can, it depends on the user, really. Right now, Steam, that entire platform, it's been there for so long. They've pretty much figured out kind of, the little engine that runs Steam. Now, there are also things on Steam that can bring the, performance issues to a head. Steam is also running background things like its own little broadcasting or recording and your friends panel and all this stuff. There's other stuff running in the background that you don't necessarily need, unless, of course, you want them. The Windows app does the same. It's running Xbox, it's running the game bar perhaps. It's using all these other things. So we just need to be aware that, well, these things actually exist. And, the number one rule to remember here with anything when it comes to your flight sim, if you're trying to chase down performance, we just need to kind of, draw a line in the sand. What is the performance we're chasing? And the important thing to remember here, lads, we're not going after frames per second. At least we're not always going after frames per second. Our objective is to get a smooth performance. That's what we're looking for. So you could have, 30 frames, but butterly smooth performance. Or you can have 60 frames, but you kind of get the odd stutter, micro stutter here and then. I'd always go with the 30 frames for smooth performance. When you're flying, 30 frames genuinely is enough. You'll often hear people say 30 frames, it is enough. 60 is better, don't get me wrong, but that fluidity, that smoothness, I would pick all day, every day, because when you're flying any sort of a stutter, it breaks the immersion and then you're chasing the aircraft. And when you fly in the real world, you don't get stutters. You get turbulence, but you don't get stutters. You know what I mean? So just be wary of that. What I do on my system, I have a local disk. This is an NVMe drive. I think it's 6,000 speed, right? And this is the main local disk. This is where Windows lives and all the main programs of my PC. Next over, I have a conventional hard drive, right? I think it's about 8,000 RPM or 9,000 RPM. It's a fast drive, but it's a 10 terabyte storage device. That's mainly for putting stuff for storage, right? And then to the right of that, I have another NVMe drive, the same as local disk C, and that's where X-Plane lives. I separate both platforms, so they're not conflicting. They shouldn't conflict, but it's just easier for me to manage, right? So I have my local disk, which is Windows and my sim. I have the E drive, which is X-Plane and games if I want to play them. And then the local disk, which is a conventional hard drive, right? That is all my storage. And the files I have in there, I don't necessarily want the sim running them in real time. If I want to use what's on there, I'll drag them across. I either put them into the community folder or I'll use add-ons linker, right? Outside of that, you can add network locations. And again, most of us, if you're with Google, right, if you have a Gmail account, you think it's a terabyte to give you free, or 50 gig or 100 gigs on the free tier. Or maybe it's 15 gigs, I can't remember. I pay like $1.99 €1.99 and have loads of memory. But you can actually add your drive locations, be it OneDrive or indeed Google Drive. You can actually add those as network locations inside your PC, which just makes things handier. You're not worried about using a website with slow UI. You can just use your normal Windows file management system. And how to do that is, if it's Google Drive, you can add a network location, or the Google Drive installer will actually ask you, do you want me to display in your PC? Yes, please. Give it a drive name, and away you go. And then you can go into other things like sharing and all this sort of jazz. But from your sim setup, Microsoft buried it, of course, in program files, right? It's not in your conventional program files. They horse it into the user's application data, like they've hidden it away. The idea being is, well, they don't want you messing with it, right? So when it comes to the locations of where your drive actually is, or where your sim actually is, and this is based on default install. If you want to put your sim somewhere that isn't default, right? And sometimes Microsoft will recommend that, especially if you're opting in for, beta testing. If you put it somewhere that isn't default, well, then you know the address. If you don't know where the address is and it is default, it'll always be in this PC, your local disk, users, Murph, or your name. It's not going to say Murph, your name. And then if you can't see a folder called App Data, because Windows by default hides this, you need to go up here. You can go to options, or you can go to view, and you would show hidden files. You want to make sure that you're telling your system, hey, show me the hidden files. And once you click on hidden files, you'll see a handful of new folders appear. And in here, we have our app data. There are 3 locations for your app data. You've local, local low, and then roaming. The sim will start off in local. We go into local, we scroll down to packages. Inside packages, we have the project name of Flight Sim 2024, which was called Project Limitless, right? They never changed the name. For whatever reason, they never changed the name. So, you often hear these code names developers give, do you remember like the PlayStation, Project something, right? So Project Limitless, that was Flight Sim 2024. So we go into this, and now we see a folder structure, not unlike the days of FSX or P3D, but we can now see app data, local cache, local state, roaming state, settings, system app data, and all the rest. Be very careful in here. If you delete something, you're going to break the sim. Just be careful. In here, in our local cache, this is where we can find a lot of our user files. But also, if we go into packages, we now can see our community folders. Now, some of these might be confusing. Some add-ons, they'll download themselves into specific community folders. They'll either say, well, I'm an official 2020, or I'm an official 2024, or I just go into the defunct community folder. The sim is reading these, so don't worry too much, right? The sim is reading these. So in my community folder, for example, you might be able to see it on screen. Some folders are, static folders. They're located in here. Other folders have a little arrow on them suggesting that, well, these are shortcuts. These are linked, right? Windows over the years has gotten better. We could say, well, you can make a hard junction or a soft junction, right? Which is like a bit of DOS code. You can say, right, mlink /. You're basically doing a shortcut, but the shortcut system at Windows has gotten better. Sometimes if you wanted to use a shortcut instead of a hard link or a soft link, other Windows stuff will, hey, what are you doing? Oh, what's this? Right? The hard link, it just skipped all that. It just gave you the file you wanted or the address you were looking for in your PC. But that's going into the rabbit hole. A shortcut works just fine. In here, my advice to anyone, your community folder needs to be as light as possible. The least amount of stuff in here, the better. Because every single program, file, add-on that you have in your community folder, your simulator is loading. And there could well be conflicts that are going to upset the sim's core features, or another add-on needs a file that's in use by something else. And this leads to all sorts of corruption files and things not loading right. And this happens all the time, right? So your general monthly maintenance, make sure you go into your community folder and take out the stuff you're not using. Now, when we look at add-ons linker, that does make it a lot easier because you can set profiles to say, well, look, I just want to fly airliners today. You load the profile and it just makes sure everything you need is now active. One thing I have noticed in 2024 specifically, if you remove You know, if you remove the file from add-ons linker, it isn't getting rid of the folder structure. So, for example, there's a file in my community folder. It's the Sam Scene design Bangkok scenery. Now, if I try to open that, the location is not available because I've removed the file. The problem there is Microsoft Flight Sim is still reading that folder, and then when it realizes it's empty, it goes, it's empty. Right, let's skip it. But that's all computing power during your startup, right? So the file isn't there. It looks like where did it go? It doesn't know, right? So this should automatically clean itself. It's not doing it right. So delete it and go back through all of this once a month. Just go into your community folder, and anything that isn't native, as in, here's the actual folder of this, well, just double check that it's still active and installed, because if it isn't, get the folder out of there. You don't need it in there. All right. And you could have, my community folder is always going to be on the heavier side because I've so many aircraft models in there for model matching when we fly in our group flights. If the sim had much better model matching, I'd literally only have the aircraft I want to fly. That'll create a much more stable environment. Much more stable, right? But alas, we are where we are, all right? So that's your community folder. And again, it's on your fastest drive, all right? So what you could look at then, some people will say, don't have the sim in the same drive as Microsoft Windows operating system. That used to be the case years ago because there were certain security files, and there was like a hierarchy of what folders on this drive get permission, right? That's all kind of changed a lot over the years. My recommendation, what happens is if you put Microsoft Flight Sim on a different drive, you could now have problems, because when the sim installs onto the local drive and you have stuff spread out, well, all of these links, all these little junctions that it has to look across, well, it's using extra computing power. For what? Right? So model matching works. Yeah, 100%, Cyrus. That's why. It's so typically ironic, Launch your community folder, fill it up with all these aircraft models that the sim just won't load, right? Brilliant. But anyway, so we get the idea. Try and keep everything in the one kind of location. It just makes it easier. And always offload the stuff you're not using. A lot of the time you're going to, I had a problem. My sim performance wasn't great. It's because you have something there you just didn't need, right? Now, while we're in here, inside this hierarchy of folders, the packages, Microsoft Limitless, in here, if you go to the local cache, if you just scroll down, there's probably a whole load of files. They mean nothing to you. Don't worry about them. They're doing their own thing, right? Model behaviors. I did get into this to play around with it. Where is this now? Show inspector side, option flags, restrict to user. Don't worry about that for the minute. See this rolling cache one? This is important. Your rolling cache file is what you set inside your simulator. And the rolling cache is basically, it's downloading the scenery, right, that you're going to fly, and it pops it into a local cache, like a temporary folder. And the idea being is when you fly somewhere else, well, it'll offload some of the old and put in some of the new. Right. I, by default, always, people will ask, what do you want as your rolling cache? 16 being the minimum. I'd always recommend 32 gigs, right? I use 64 because I've always used 64. It just works out great. But do note, if you find that you're getting stutters or problems in your sim, or maybe the scenery isn't loading right, delete that rolling cache folder. Just delete it. Make sure the sim is turned off. You can go to that rolling cache file and just delete it. And then when you go back into your sim, you create another one. That tends to fix an awful lot of problems. You'll often hear people say, hey, check your rolling cache, right? Now, some people might say, well, turn the rolling cache off. You don't need it. Your internet is fast enough. Or you download all the sceneries you want. We used to have the ability in 2020 where you can literally look at the map, draw a big grid over it and say, right, download all of that for me, please. I haven't figured that one out in 2024. Sure, it's in there somewhere. But your rolling cache is basically, it's a snapshot of all the different sceneries in which you've flown over. The idea behind it is when you reload the sim, well, it loads faster because the scenery is now local. And if it needs any updates, it's only listening for any updates, right? So that's where your rolling cache is. And again, once a month, I'd recommend getting that out. Just delete it. Delete the rolling cache and create a new cache file. It's important because sometimes you could have rolling cache with a scenery from last month and the developer now updated it yesterday. Your rolling cache is looking at last month. Now it's looking at yesterday and it's putting in a lot of cases, the same files on top of one another. That can lead to all sorts of problems, right? So I'd always recommend delete that rolling cache once a month. And that's all you need to do. All right. Any questions so far? I think mine clears itself once a month. Yeah. The add-on linker bug, I didn't know. Maybe file a bug to the creator. Says Just Roy. Brownie's here. Morning, Merv. Is this deja vu? I was messing with all my storage yesterday on the new PC. Ooh. Cyrus has a question. Is your question ... Shag off. Now let me see. Hey mate, love your stream. Enjoy. Where's this now? Enjoy being part of the community. Would you mind adding me up on Discord? My username it's Clint. Yeah, sure. Jump over to Discord, Clint. Why not? Why not? Cyrus, is that your question? Brilliant. So that's the rolling cache, right? So we've covered installing your sim. It really doesn't matter if it's going to be on Steam or if it's going to be on, the Microsoft app. Just know where it is you're installing it. Choose your fastest drive. You have the options in the Windows Store app. You have the options in Steam. Choose your fastest possible drive, right? Very important. Exos is here. Sent you something on Discord. Thank you very much. Good morning. Right. So, Windows preparation, right? Couple of things to watch. There's something I do, and I found that this helps, right? Windows by default has a number of background processes, and you can go into your settings, right? And there are certain things you can turn on or turn off when it comes to, your gaming, if you like. One of them is the game bar. Now, the game bar from Xbox is designed for like sharing things, taking screenshots, even recording. Make sure this gadget is turned off because it's using resources. And if you're not using game bar specifically, turn the shagging thing off. It's a background process that is constantly talking and listening. So if you just turn it off, it's not going to affect your sim. Make sure game bar is off. All right. Also, we have what's called game mode. Now, game mode is designed to optimize the PC. It's Windows' way of saying, this is a game, right? Well, then, if it's a game, we will turn off Cloud Sync. We will turn off visualization. We will, but it just doesn't do it, right? It doesn't do it well, right? So you can have game mode on or off. I tend to leave it off, which a lot of people would say you're mad, but I leave game mode off and then I run my own script to turn other stuff off that I know it's off and it doesn't come back on, right? So play around with game mode, have a look at it, and I'm going to show you how to properly check your system, check your sim when it comes to the performance. Game mode is a setting that some users have reported, very good performance when it's turned on, but other users say, they get better performance when it's turned off. Your mileage is going to vary, but just be aware there is an option called game mode. It's in your Windows settings. The idea of game mode was to do that. It was to prioritize everything because you're now in a game, right? But they don't do it well enough. Gaming mode for me should be unrestrict your GPU, unrestrict your RAM, unrestrict everything. That's what it should do. Give you maximum performance across the board, but it doesn't work like that. It should, but it doesn't, Ross is here. Good to see you. Mr. TPHI, good morning. Hope you're well. Did you experience better performance? With game mode off, yes. On my specific rig, with game mode off, I get better performance. I get less latency. I get better main thread performance. I get a smoother experience. In Microsoft Flight Sim, right? There's other games. Forza, for example. If I want to play Forza, I got to turn that on because Forza's a pig unless that's turned on. It's weird. But for Microsoft Flight Sim, this is the gadget. It works on my system. But again, check, right? Go into your settings, see what's on now, right? See how the sim is handling, then try turn it off. You always turn it back on again if the performance degrades, right? So that's game mode, which is important. What else do we have in our options then? The Windows drive or drive indexing. Now, you might say, what are you talking about? In the background, there's a process in Windows that's constantly looking at all your files and folders, And when something changes, I'll update you. It's running in the background. Now, it's grand, you know, if you're doing kind of general word processing or you're doing office work and where's that file, where's this, where's that, you don't need that process turned on whilst you're flying. There's no need for it. The search indexer, you're not searching for anything. The sim knows where all the files are. So I would turn that off. I made a little script file for that. It's an automatic thing. You run the zip file. It turns off Defender. It turns off the Windows indexer just for the drive in which you're utilizing Microsoft Flight Sim. Now, some people mightn't want to turn off Defender. Your mileage is going to vary. It depends on what you're looking up on the internet, right? But I do that. It's constantly scanning for files, and Microsoft Flight Sim uses huge file trees and small package files consistently. So the indexing causes background disk reads, CPU overhead because it has to do its job, and the occasional impact on streaming stuff coming in and out, depending on where you're flying. So what you can do, if you go into the sim drive or wherever the drive is, right? If we were to, let's look at the instructions here. If we go to properties, and we should have, see this, allow files on this drive to have its contents indexed in addition to the file properties, right? And if you don't want to do the drive, maybe just do the folder. But try this. Now, what I did, I used friggin' ChatGPT. Hey, I want a script that if I press a button on my Elgato, I want you to turn off indexing. And then when I press another button, I want you to turn it back on again. It wrote the script for me. So now it's just press the button, turn off the, done, right? Brilliant. What's the real-time differences with this? I think it depends on what you're using in the sim, especially when it comes to streaming data. All right. I have seen, I always use this now because it was measured at like 0.7 milliseconds, but there is an impact. Without a shadow of a doubt, there is an impact. But again, your mileage will vary on that. So search indexing, or the indexing of files and folders, attempt to turn it off on your next sim and see on your next sim session and just see, does it make any difference to you? You know what I mean? Naughty Gnome, good to see you. Just done that. Wait, didn't know you could just turn it off with the drive. Yeah. Hey, Cracker's here. Good to see you. I run Bitdefender and it supposedly goes into game mode when I start the sim, but does it really? Absolutely not. Bitdefender, you know, Norton antivirus, any of that, that's bloatware. That'll slow your stuff down, right? Depends on what your security needs are, right? But Windows Defender pretty much does enough for the general PC user, right? Bitdefender has some nice things when it comes to like the vault and, you know, passwords and whatnot. But I used to use Bitdefender and I would just turn it off. Because if you run the sim with Bitdefender on gaming mode, and then you run the sim with Bitdefender turned off, and then you run the sim with Bitdefender completely uninstalled, you'll see the difference. There is a difference, you know, which is kind of nuts. But just remember to turn it back on. Now, if you do it this way, allow files and folders on this drive to have contents index in it. Like if you turn this off and hit apply, Windows will save that. If you write a script which is designed to stop the process, so I have a button over here. I'll press a button, PowerShell will fire up, and it'll do its stuff and say, right, Murph, I've done the following: TTM mode enabled, Defender's off, Windows search is off. And that was just a script I got ChatGPT to make. When the PC restarts, they're turned back on again. And I have a button over here to turn them back on manually if I need to. All right? So we get the idea. All right? A decent ad blocker script blocker is the biggest security improvement you can do. Don't think you need antiviruses anymore. Not to the extent. It depends on what you're doing. Some people need them, but it depends on what they're doing, right? What I'm saying is anything like that, any other program that's managing access to files and folders when you're trying to use a flight simulator, it's going to have an impact on your flight sim. Just to be aware of it. I'm not saying get rid of it. I'm not saying get it. Just be aware it could be causing, or it is causing some sort of impact. Could be good or bad. Depends on your mileage. You know what I mean? I don't use it. I don't need third-party antiviruses. I just don't need it. Windows Defender does a good enough job for me, right? But your mileage will vary once again, so just be aware of it, all right? So that's what we do when it comes to indexing. The other thing then would be real-time protection scans. Now, what happens here, right? When you have Windows Defender real-time scans, which is important to have, it's reading your Wasom folders, it's reading your rolling cache, it's also reading your scenery indexes. Defender can scan those files in the middle of your flight simming stream. And also other programs like, you know, Google Drive or OneDrive. You could be flying along and next thing, why is my performance gone so bad? There's stuff in the background running, so you just need to be aware of it. You can turn it off. You can have a button. Turn it off. You can exclude a drive. Hey, turn this off for this drive. Just be aware of it. You can do things like that, you know, and they do make an impact, right? If you want to go in and have a look, you can add exclusions for your main drive, your add-ons drive, and your cache folder. Or just put in the whole limitless folder. Exclude that. So you go Windows Security, Virus and Threat Protection, Manage, Settings, Exclusions. But of course, only do that if your web usage would be classed as safe. You know, you're going to safe websites, secure websites, that kind of stuff. If you're acting the devil, leave that stuff on. Otherwise, you'll get viruses left, right, and center. You know what I mean? But yeah, on that, hit ortho map enhancer. You can do, again, you need to trust the program, right? Where are they getting their data from? How secure is that data, right? Like when it comes to your own security on your PC, it's a very important and very sensitive thing, right? But it does impact on your sim, so you need to kind of have, you know, trade one against the other. When you're in a flight sim, are you just in the flight sim and everything else is turned off? You've no browsers open, you're not looking up, you know, videos or whatever, you're just flying. If that's the case, well, you're going to be safe. If you are using multiple websites or you're downloading or whatever, well, then you'd want to make sure you keep that stuff on. But just be aware, it could be a reason you're getting some sort of interrupt with the performance. All right. Now, we've other things when we're talking about Windows settings, power plans, right? So if we were to go in here and type power, Windows power plans, pause. There are some important settings in here, and I'd recommend you have a look at them. Your power setting, you can have these default settings to say, you know, high performance, ultimate performance, keep Greta happy, all the sort of stuff. I tend to go for a custom profile, right? So I edit the current plan, and then I get all these power options. And in here, you know, you can go high performance, power saver, ultimate performance, whatever, right? And the BitSum stuff from Project Lasso, that does a fairly good job at this. But what I'd recommend, for example, I don't allow the PC to turn off my hard disk. Because it can actually say, oh, you're not using this drive, we're going to shut it off now to save power. The operating system obviously thinking that, you know, you want to be invited to Greta Thunberg's next birthday, or in fact, you're on a laptop. If you're on a laptop, well, be careful with these settings, because, you know, if your laptop is, oh, I should get 6 hours, and next thing you get 6 minutes. Well, this is the territory we're now in, right? So have a look at, I always set turn off hard disk, never turn it off. Internet Explorer, don't worry too much about that. Desktop background, don't worry about that. Wireless adapter settings, I leave that on maximum performance. Your wireless adapter, if you're using Wi-Fi, right? If you put it into power saving, it's not constantly giving it the beans. It'll calm it down. If it calms down, you're trying to fly, and next thing you're waiting on data, that's possibly why. A screamer when it comes to us flight simmers. This is vital. You have a setting in here for USB settings, and it says here USB selective suspend setting. Now what this does, this is Windows having a look saying, well, this USB hasn't been turned on in the last 5 minutes. Well, I'm going to turn it off now. Stop powering that. It's grand for, like, you know, office work, but in a sim, that could literally turn off your rudder pedals. It could turn off it can turn off your hardware. So make sure that is disabled. Disable that setting. USB selective suspended settings. And the problem with this, it's an operating system thing. You'll do these changes here, and then you go into device manager, and then you'll still see that some certain stuff are turned on. But start with this. So if you have any problems with disconnects, you know, Jesus, it's in here. chances are it's in here, or the drive is faulty, or whatever. You know what I mean? Naughty Gnome says, I have a question. I have 2020 and 2024 on my main drive. I haven't used 2020 in months. I'm not short of space. Is it worth uninstalling it? Okay, so the pros and cons to that, Naughty. 2020... put it this way. Navigraph is going to be looking at it, and nothing else you have. Hardware profiles are going to be reading it when it needs to update. Any third-party program, if it's, you know, compatible, it's going to be looking at it. As in, you know, Just Flight, is it a 24 aircraft or a 2020 aircraft? You know, I still have mine installed. None of the files are active when I'm running.
Hello there.
If you don't have problem with space, I'd keep it there. I don't think 2020 isn't yet finished. You know, I mean, they're currently working on a beta, right? Now, what's going to drag people to keep using 2020? I'm unsure, but we know there's aircraft that exist there. Also, add-ons that won't work in 2024, they're still in 2020. So I'd keep it there, man. I'd keep it there, you know? The Impossible Face, have a good one, buddy. Have a good one. But yeah. So USB selective suspending, make sure that's turned off. Then you have your processor power management. Be careful with this one. If you're on an Intel, I would say have minimum and maximum speeds at 100. If you're on AMD, I'd lower this a little bit. Minimum setting, drop it to maybe like 50. And then your maximum 100. Again, your power profile, if you're using something like Process Lasso, that's going to do it. Or Lasso, that's definitely going to do it, right? But if it is the case you're not quite sure, this is where you can do it in the power settings. Basically, you're telling the processor, minimum power, I want you to have 100%. Maximum power, you're going to have 100%. So every time the sim is trying to do something, or your computer for that matter, it looks at the processor and say, right, do this. And the processor says, yep, boom, we're off, we're done, right? It doesn't always work well with AMD, especially with the X3D chips. They prefer having a bit of a balance. It manages it better. It just does, right? It just does. Let me see. X-Fly going to see it. I uninstalled 2020, committed to 2024. It's weird that when using 24 mainly, you were more or less lost in 2020 since things are different. Well, not really. I mean, 2020's UI, I think for a lot of people was better. You know, they enjoyed it more. Or we figured it out and we just got used to it. 24 kind of changed that for us. Like, oh, where's this hidden now? But like everything, lads, it's over time. If they were to change it again, we'll complain. We just figured out how the 2024 one works. You know? It's just one of those things. Other things in here, AMD Power Slider, the overlay stuff if you're using it, switchable dynamic graphics. Again, anything that gives you performance, turn it on performance. Multimedia stuff, no, turn off displays. I don't turn them off. The TV has its own timer built into it. All right? So they're power settings. You might think, really, I'm telling you, these are important. These are important, right? So that's what we go to there. Now, there's optional things here. You might have heard of Expo or XMP in your BIOS. 2020 did not like any sort of overclocking with your RAM, which was just ridiculous. Any instability at all? Nah, didn't like it. 24 plays a little bit nicer, DirectX 12 and all that. So you have options with your RAM. If you didn't know this, when you have a PC with RAM, and they might tell you a clock speed, you know, megahertz, or they'll probably give you something in, you know, mega transfers a second. But by default, your computer may not, unless it's programmed, your computer may not be running the full speed available of that RAM. So they're called XMP or Expo profiles, meaning that you can tell the computer, hey, see this RAM? Run it there at full tilt, please. And then you have to get into the BIOS, because there's a BIOS level, and then you can tweak it and say, right, put it up there to your maximum speed. You can overclock your RAM beyond those speeds. I don't recommend it, but you can do that, right? They're BIOS settings. Just be careful if you're doing it. If your sim is running absolutely fine, don't even go near it. But there are huge advantages to have XMP profiles or Expo profiles running. So you go into your BIOS, depending on what your board manufacturer is, they're going to be slightly different. You can Google it, right? You can't go too wrong. There are safety features in there when you go to select profiles, right? If you select a profile, your machine will try and boot it. If it's not stable, it'll reset it and bring it back to the BIOS. Can't do it. The clock speeds haven't matched, right? AMD chips in particular, X3D, they want to go off and learn how to use these speeds, right? So traditionally AMD is longer to boot up, but just to be aware that XMP profiles or Expo profiles, they will have an impact on your sim. Things can load a little bit faster. You can get through menus a little bit quicker, right? But they can also bring some instability into your sim as well. So if you're having a lot of issues, check your RAM. No harm in checking it and see if the XMP profile is turned on or off. And then, well, try it the other way. It's all for science. It's all about testing, right? It's all about testing. That's what we're after. You know, if you got an AMD CPU, you actually don't need Process Lasso. It installed their chipset drivers. Yeah, AMD does all the work. Yeah. You can still tweak it, but you can. I still don't get why they changed keybinds. It's only because they added so many more interactions with the sim. They had to add more keybinds. That's what they did, right? But anyway, sorry, Murph. Did you say turn off USB settings? In your power profile, turn off or disable USB power suspending. You don't want your PC suspending power to your USBs, especially for flight sim, because you're plugged into USBs with your peripherals, so you don't need them to turn them off, right? So I leave them off. It's disabled, all right? So you disable that setting. So XMP is important, so just be aware of it. Now, there's two other things. I won't dive too deep into it. Just be aware of it. One of them is the resizable bar. That this is all the rage, right? And then you have HAGS, which is hardware accelerated GPU scheduling, all right? So we'll talk about this briefly, just to give an idea. So what we have here, the resizable bar, normally your CPU will access small chunks of GPU VRAM at a time. Resizable bar allows the CPU to access the full GPU VRAM directly. So in Microsoft Flight Sim, it's important because, well, we've large textures, large photogrammetry, and large aircraft. With rebar enabled, you should be getting faster textures loading, slightly improved GPU efficiency, and reduced CPU overhead. You should expect somewhere between 2 and 5% of an uplift with resizable bar. It's more noticeable the higher the resolution, and if you go into the higher VRAM stuff. So some people have it on, some people have it off. Again, your mileage is going to vary with having resize bar on or off. By default, I think it's off. Right? So if you ever hear someone saying, have you changed your resizable bar? What are you talking about? Resizable bar is a Windows settings, usually through your BIOS, right? Look it up. I'm not going to teach you how to use resizable bar because I don't know enough about it. There are plenty of videos out there by way more competent people who will say, this is how you turn it off, or this is how you check for it, or ask one of our guys in the community, all right? It can use more VRAM, but the idea being is if you have the power and it's just like it's there, well, why not use the power? You're going to get a better performance out of your sim. The last other option you could look at is that of HAGS, the hardware accelerated GPU scheduling. This one needs, well, I'll explain it, right? Normally, Windows schedules the GPU tasks. With HAGS, the GPU handles more of its own scheduling directly. This reduces CPU scheduling overhead. So with Microsoft Flight Sim, your main thread limited, that's your CPU bottleneck, reducing the CPU scheduling overhead can improve your frame time, slightly reduce CPU, and it'll help your GPU in limited scenarios. Doesn't always help though. You could get GPU generation, it depends on your GPU generation, the driver version, and what build of Windows, right? On most 40 or 50 RTX cards, it's often positive when you turn off HAGS. On the older GPUs, it can cause instability. If you go into game mode, graphics, you'll see where you have advanced graphics, hardware accelerated GPU scheduling. That's the ticket right there. I've mine on I've tested it with it being off. With 2020, DirectX 12 didn't function without HAGs being off. It needed it off, at least on my rig. I couldn't get into a flight using DX12 on flights in 2020 unless I turned off the hardware accelerated GPU scheduling. Now, at the time, that was a 14900K Intel card, right? But yes, you also enable the option memory content restore option in your BIOS. This disables the memory learning option, or leave it on if installed with new RAM. Yeah. Again, a lot of that is aimed at AMD stuff, but yes, it depends on the motherboard. You can go in and tell your RAM. I mean, for a lot of users, what happens is you turn on your PC, the RAM then says, great, I'm going to figure out now what I can do here. And the other components of the PC are asking, hey, RAM, how are you feeling? What are you going to run at? So the RAM goes off and figures out what it can do with its speeds. And once it knows when it's comfortable, it'll say, yeah, we're all good here. Right, it'll launch the PC. You can turn that whole learning thing off, whereby it just loads its known configuration settings. It can speed up loading times. But just be aware, if you're getting a BIOS update, well, it might turn that off. So just be aware of it. But there is a lot of extra stuff with your PC that you can do at user, like you can do these safely at a user level. You're not worried about, no, the thing exploded. These are options that you can mess around with without too much worry, you know. But the hardware accelerated GPU scheduling, by default, it's on, right? But if you have issues, or you know, you can see that you know, your CPU has a lot more space, well, turn it off, right? And see what happens. It's all about testing, right? When to disable or when to consider disabling the GPU scheduler if you're getting constant crashes, or especially when it comes to VOR. Especially with VOR. If you're having problems with VOR performance, turn off HAGs. Try the sim. If you restart a PC, restart your sim, and then try another session and just see what the difference is. You should see a difference, you know? But test it both ways. So, we'll move on. So we figured out where to install the sim. We've had a look at some of the options around the sim and around where you're installing it, be it power profiles, you know, locations and all this sort of jazz, just to be aware of it. We had a look at the rolling cache, symbolic drives. I wouldn't use. I think we've enough, or you know, the operating systems have done enough now when it comes to the shortcut folders. You know what I mean? So yeah, interesting stuff. Hey, Hayden is here. Good to see you. Does running windowed or full screen make any difference? It depends. Again, it depends on your graphics. Full screen typically should work better in the sim. Full screen, because it's a fully rendered screen. It's not trying to recalculate sizes, and by doing so, game mode would favor you know, full screen. However, you do have optimizations on your graphics card that you can optimize windowed mode, meaning that if you want to run in a windowed mode, and you know, you move your mouse around and all this kind of jazz, well, you can do that too. There's no right or wrong answer for that. I know, for example, on X-Plane, windowed mode runs worse than full screen for me. On QA Pilot, Sam will tell you windowed mode works better for him. It all depends on your configuration, you know. If you have an AMD CPU, AMD's Precision Boost technology allows Ryzen to dynamically increase clock speeds up to the maximum advertised speed. Yeah. Again, the hardware that you have, there could be features there that you're not using. But just be aware, like if you're looking at, you know, Ryzen this and, you know, GeForce Experience that, they all contain an absolute ton of bloatware. Stuff that just like, hey, you should buy this new CPU, or hey, you should buy this new GPU. Like there's stuff there you don't necessarily need. So unless you're having like absolutely massive issues, I wouldn't worry about this sort of stuff. A lot of what you need is going to be on by default, and a lot of what you don't need is turned off by default. This is only kind of, you know, peeking behind the curtain to say, well, what options do we have? You know what I mean? You can do, like, absolutely get lost in the rabbit hole here. And some people do. I've spent hours just testing different Windows configuration settings, be it with the power, location, speeds, indexing, antiviruses. I've done all this to see, well, hang on, where can I actually squeeze the most performance for the sim? You know what I mean? But I digress. The HAGS, hardware accelerated GPU scheduling, that's one to have a look at. Game bar, make sure you turn that off. Game mode, well, try it with it on or off. Couple of settings there. All right. Now, if we want to move on to say, right, we've now installed the sim, we have all our Windows settings absolutely fantastically brilliant, right? Well, what about our add-ons? Where should we have our add-ons? Should we just be using the Microsoft Marketplace? Which, in theory, the answer is yes, because in theory, it's the fastest and the most structured way to get add-ons without worrying about conflicts, because they only stream what you need when you need it. If you go the community folder route, well, the sim is loading up everything. It wants to see everything. It's not going to use everything, but it is loading it. So be careful what's in your community folder. Now, because we're talking community folder, I'm going to go over to Add-ons Linker. Now, Add-ons Linker is a third-party freeware tool, right? Again, this is only for PC users. You can download it over on flightsim.to. And what Add-ons Linker does, it's basically it's your simulator management platform that will allow you to have files, aircraft scenery, liveries, plugins, whatever, on different drives, or have them on the same drives, but it gives you better overall control of what's active and what's not active. It's a great bit of kit, this, but it's not foolproof, right? It's not MRF proof. There's issues with it, right? You don't have to be afraid. It's mostly for undervolting the CPU. Yeah, it's cool. Like if you look at like Jay's 2 cents, look at Jay's stuff, right? Even Linus, if you look at some of their stuff, they'll show you different ways that you can add these tweaks to your machine. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with your PC. It's not just turn it on and see what happens. You know, nothing is MRF proof, right? Marketplace is good as it manages updates. If you bought a heap of add-ons outside the marketplace, you always forget to check if they're up to date. Yeah, that's a problem. Now there are tools within Add-ons Linker that'll help with that. But what I use Add-ons Linker for, I use it for loading in aircraft, liveries, plugins, some scenery files, and if I'm only doing sceneries that I want to use on the stream. Now it's important, the following. The structures behind this. See the way I have aircraft, liveries, plugins. Now I have 2 sets of plugins because one is for 2024, right? I have other plugins that were technically 2020, but I run them in 2024, right? I want to show you the file structure to this. Again, the Add-ons Linker is not looking at slower drives. If I go into my slower drive and I go to my flight sim stuff, well, here's all my flight sim stuff, all of it, right? You know, if I go into, I don't know, go into aircraft. These are all my aircraft, like all of them. You can imagine that's where they live, right? However, I do have a 2024 folder now because I've been building this up over time, and that's where I throw my stuff, right? So when I download stuff, if I'm using flightsim.to for a purchase or if I'm using Sim Market, the Unibuilds manager I'm happy enough with, and I'm also happy enough with the Orbex stuff because they install into their own Orbex folder. They're quite good installers, right? They do a good job. And technically, they're using the very same technology. Unibuilds, their Ini manager, it's using the same thing. It will install it where it needs to be installed, but it could be sitting in a different folder. Aerosoft do this as well, all right? But anyway, you get the gist of it. If I were to go into my main drive where I have my sim, well, I have this flight sim files. Now in here, this is a mirror of what we're looking at in the Add-ons Linker. I have aircraft, liveries, plugins 24, scenery, and stream only, right? Now, anything I move into these folders will then become available over here. And you'll notice then when I click on them, I have a green light or a red light. Green light means, well, it's loaded. Red light, I haven't loaded it. It's sitting on the drive, but I haven't loaded it, right? And this is all pointing back to the community folder for Microsoft Flight Sim 2024. You can use folders outside of that, but I have found there's issues here, especially with 2024. It just doesn't play nice. There's something we can't see, and Cyrus will probably back me up on this. There's just something not working the way it should. It'll either lead to a stutter or the CTD. There's something just not 100% right, even with the latest update with Add-ons Linker, right? So don't leak any new add-ons. Oh yeah, right? Do you know? But you get the idea. So aircraft, if I were to go into aircraft, so in here I have, here's certain World War II aircraft or vintage aircraft, military aircraft. I'll have a barrel load of aircraft because I want it for model matching. If I go into my scenery, well, the scenery, these are the sceneries I always load in. I'll always load these ones in. And for whatever reason, it's not loading Baldonnel, but it is, because I know it's active. I probably have that located directly into the sim itself, right? Add-ons Linker is tremendous for doing this. It's very handy because what you can say, you can set a preset. Down the bottom, we have presets. And if I were to create a preset, for example, GA flying, right? Okay, well, if I'm only going to fly GA, it's going to unload stuff I just don't need. All deliveries for airliners, don't need that. Airliners, don't need them. I just want to fly GA. So you're selecting a preset, and the idea behind it is, well, your sim should be running more efficiently because it's not loading in a ton of stuff you don't actually need. All right. So the add-ons linker is extremely powerful here. Just be careful if you're pointing add-ons linker to a drive outside of your main drive. I wouldn't put aircraft in there because it's just not working right. There's something there. I don't know what it is. The sim takes an extra second to go, okay, it's over there. That's just my experience from it. If you're going to have, add-ons linker and you're using aircraft, just put them on the same drive. And then you'll probably say to yourself, well, if they're on the same drive, should just put them in the community folder. But maybe you don't want them all, right? Add-ons linker, it's free to grab. There are features in it. The presets I absolutely love. You can do its own configuration files, find duplicates, find, corrupt files. It'll do all that for you. And there are ways you can kind of point it to say, well, show me the version number and let me know if there's an update. You can do these things, UK 2000, yeah, they're still going. PS Miranda, good to see you. Just created a comment about the shortcut folder in the com folder. Just to let you know, Merv, just created a comment about the shortcut folders in the com folder. Okay, thanks, Roy. Lord Fried is here. Good morning. Quick tip, my 2 cents for sceneries. I use subfolders for continents: Asia, Europe, North America, Oceania, so you can quickly enable or disable them. Yeah, a great idea. 100% great idea. So, for example, I have scenery in here, and there's no real structure to this at the moment. And then I've stream only. Again, there's no real structure. However, if I want to go into scenery, right, not what I'm loading into my sim, but in my storage area, if I go to flight stuff, 2024, and I go to scenery, well, this is where I've broken it down. Asia, Australia, Canada, the Caribbean, right? Croatia, Denmark. So I know roughly. And then if I really wanted to do it, I can say, well, Europe, North America, exactly what Lord Fried is doing. I'm very touchy when it comes to what scenery I'm loading. So if I'm flying in Europe, well, I'm not going to load up all my European sceneries. I could just horse in, France, for example. You get the idea? So you can do all of these things. You can also do the same with aircraft, right? So, if I go to aircraft, you can see some of them here. Gliders, World War II. If I go into me standard aircraft from 2020, well, this is where I have airliners, business aircraft, choppers, general aviation, all this sort of stuff live in here. All this sort of stuff. Others, right? There could be mad stuff. And that's how I know. That's just my filing structure to say, I want this aircraft. Off it goes, right? The problem with that is, though, it becomes a pain in the ass because you don't know if there was an update or not. Pain in the ass kind of stuff, all right? So with add-ons linker, I think the most powerful thing about it is the presets, right? It's pretty cool because you can say, right, well, I want a general aviation preset, and then you can look at your sceneries. And if, you go, well, I'm going to fly in Ireland or I'm going to fly in America, you can even break it down by the state. It just means you're trying to achieve the same objective, lads, and that is keeping as little as possible or using as little as possible in the community folder. That's using add-ons linker. On the flip side to all of that, if you were to use the sim, and this is where it gets powerful, because you have my library, and automatically everything's going to be streamed to you. So you don't have the headache of worried about updates or, I need to move this file across, right? It's already in the sim for you, and they just stream it to you when you need it. The problem is right now, not everyone is on the marketplace. They have the reasons, I'm sure, but that's where the problem is. In an ideal world, there would only be the marketplace, but it's just not there yet. It'll get better. I know it'll get better, but at the moment, it's just not there, right? Now, there are stuff I have installed locally, or everything else is going to be streamed. And you might say, well, sure, look, I don't need half of these aircraft. I don't need all of this stuff. You can turn them off if you wish, or you can turn them on if you wish, right? But because they're getting streamed to you, well, you're only going to use them if you use them. If you're not going to use them, they're not streaming you anything, right? So this is, in terms of having a more stable simulator, this is how you do it. Stick to the marketplace and stream it. It is the most stable way to do it, right? Mightn't be the best depending on your speed or how Microsoft servers are acting that day. There's always going to be a caveat to it. But in terms of, running outdated products or, file corruptions and all this sort of jazz, this is the cleanest way to do it. If you choose to download aircraft from the marketplace, which you can do, any aircraft. So here's the Coronado B390. If I click on this, more options, I can disable it, or I can download it locally, meaning that that'll just run now in my sim. The trade-off for that is, yes, I don't need to wait on loading in terms of streaming, but the problem with that now I have is, well, potentially a longer loading time because the sim has to load it into its libraries. All right. Create backups also from there. From, where's this now? English, Roy, English. Also important, create backups from there. Oh, backups from the add-ons linker. Yeah, you can do that, 100%. In a box man is here, good to see you. Can add-ons linker deal with external add-ons too? Not really. Well, some OpenTrack, no, but like it can launch. It's mainly used for the add-ons themselves, scenery and aircraft plugins. It can activate all those. So let's say if you're using the GTN 750 or the TDS GTN XI, well, you can pop both of them into add-ons linker or tell add-ons linker, go look for them. And then you can select from add-ons linker, well, which one do you want active today? Right? So you can do that kind of stuff, The advantage or disadvantage, if you go in and check, so I have the YS11 installed, more options. I can, if there was an update, it would say update available. Or, if I could disable that, or if I uninstall it, I can uninstall this aircraft. So if I say uninstall, it's going to say, right, we're going to lift that off your community folder there now. And as soon as I uninstall it, it'll default back to be streamed. Meaning, this aircraft is only going to load when I need it. If I want to do a search now for the YS11, we'll find it here. There it is. It now says it's streamed. So I've freed up 2 gigs off my drive, and if and when I want to use the aircraft, it's going to stream it to me. There are advantages to it being streamed. I'm going to get the latest, right? I don't need to have all that information saved. The sim isn't going to load that up at the start. So you get the idea, right? That's how that works. It can be handy. In an ideal world, everything will be in the marketplace, but it just isn't now. Do you know what I mean? Some of the headaches we have as well, when it comes, we could do this in 2020. We can't do it in 2024. We can't let add-ons linker decide what modules we want loaded because, well, everything is encrypted on 2024. All the base aircraft, all the Wasom stuff, they've encrypted them. Which, I don't know why they did it, because they didn't do it in 2020, or they did and then they opened it up. And the reason then, if all these files that are encrypted, they just don't want people editing them to go outside of what the restrictions they've put in place for 2024 to work correctly. Like, I understand why they've done it, right? But it just means then you're limited on kind of liveries or, aircraft tweaking, change the files around a little bit. You're kind of limited there, right? One thing we need to be careful of, when it comes to the add-ons linker or in the sim, Now, Add-ons linker is getting better, but it's possible you could be loading the same aircraft twice. And this happens. You could load the same scenery twice. You could have something being streamed to you, right? And then your add-ons linker, for whatever reason, is, maybe the file name is slightly different and it tries to load it. Suddenly you now have duplicate assets in the sim. You want to watch for that. Just be careful with that. Again, like the best way to do this is having, the least amount of stuff in your community folder when you want to go flying. The less stuff, it's gas, but like I'm telling you, the less stuff that's in there, the less that can go wrong, right? So you want to, try and get in the habit of saying, right, that's why I have, this stream only folder. So if I'm showing off, new stuff, I'll pop that into me stream only because it's only going to be on the stream. Our VATSIM flights, that goes into the stream only. And I disable stuff I'm not using. So maybe you should do that, this flight only, and just go in and have a quick look and say, right, well, I want turn these off, turn these on. Or indeed you save profiles. So if I go into stream only, I can turn on or turn off stuff depending on what it is I'm doing. All right. Any questions so far, lads? Is this why we see double aircraft looking like they're humping? No. So why you see double aircraft is you have SimConnect and you have Microsoft Flight Sim. You have something else like VATSIM or Skynet or JoinFS injecting its own model, and the timing is wrong. It's not getting enough updates. That's why it slingshots forward. All right. That's what happens there, unfortunately. Okie dokie. Now, what are we looking at here? When it gets into your internet speed or internet quality, right? Is there anything we could look at? Again, it's background apps that are potentially using your internet. You want to make sure they're turned off when you're simming. Also, as a rule of thumb, when it comes to your internet, if you have the option for a wired connection versus Wi-Fi, always go with a wired connection. Even if it's a wire plugged into the Wi-Fi, always go with a wired connection, right? Because if it's a Wi-Fi only, which can work, you can have data packets drop out and all this sort of stuff, right? So always try and have it wired if you can. And then if you are running your internet at home, you do have options as well. Look at your router settings, your modem settings. There's a ton of features in that you can actually say, hey, give priority to this PC or to these files, or open up ports and all this kind of stuff, right? Just be aware you can get into that stuff as well. Also recommend called Total Commander, a file manager. Yeah, I've heard of that before, Roy. Yeah, that's pretty good. Empire Kicking, good to see you. Some people like myself have everything downloaded rather than streaming. What are your thoughts on that, even with good speeds? People who want to keep their data, it's their choice, really, right? When it comes to having, marketplace items or simulator items, if you have relatively good internet, there's absolutely no need to download them. In actual fact, by downloading them, you're potentially delaying the process of loading the sim because it's now looking locally and has to load up everything. And then maybe you've Windows Defender looking at all of these things. Then you've Windows Indexer looking at all of these things. And you may not be rocking the most up-to-date files. That could be a problem. When you stream it, you are getting the most up-to-date files. With a caveat, knowing that, well, you might have to delete the cache and then start again. You know what I mean? So I wouldn't always jump at it. Adam Controls, good to see you. Captain Kenobi, welcome in. Hope you're well. So, yeah, I mean, if you have good speeds, I just wouldn't bother downloading them all. It becomes a pain in the ass when there's updates. You know what I mean? Yeah, you can just go in and say, yeah, I have 20 updates today. Start downloading them. But the idea of having all of this streamed, they look after it, you've 2 gigs up and down. Yeah, that's more than fast, Mr. Minimite says, I found it really demanding airports, I get better performance. Now, here's one. But airports. Airports are the bane of our existence in Microsoft Flight Sim. Now, scenery developers, I love scenery developers. They're highly skilled, lovely people. The problem is the sim doesn't always handle certain sceneries because certain scenery developers are putting in literally thousands of objects and they're not necessarily building it correctly. And then us as users are freaking out because we're getting stutters, right? So what's happened and what is happening more and more, well, Microsoft are now looking at this and they're now saying, okay, well, if the scenery is being streamed, we're now going to recode how that scenery is streamed to you, especially when you're on a short final. We're going to try and offload and, clear off the cache and only load what you need because they're using too many objects. That's what it boils down to. Too many objects. Some scenery developers don't have this issue at all. The finesse and the attention to detail is second to none. Other scenery developers, they could be new in the game, right? Or they just don't care. That's where they become problematic. For a lot of people, keeping sceneries local, downloading sceneries can prove advantageous rather than streaming sceneries. I don't have a lot of streamed sceneries. Nearly all of my scenery I load it directly from my own. Because I don't buy scenery that much on the marketplace. I have some scenery there, but not much. I'd rather keep the scenery because we've other advantages to having scenery local. If you look at the INI manager, Innie's manager, you can kind of edit the scenery at clicking buttons rather than going into config files. You can say, well, look, give me 2K graphics or, disappear the walking people around. Like, we have better options on how we can control the scenery. Do you know what I mean? If you have the same scenery to the marketplace, you don't have the control. The sim is doing it. You'd argue the sim should be doing it better. But it depends. It depends. If Wi-Fi prefer 5 gig over 2.4, 5 gig has some performance and reliability improvements. It does. But again, I would not use Wi-Fi if I could avoid it. But is there a way to make photogrammetry sharper looking and not melted? No. Absolutely not. That is the limitation of the technology. Some photogrammetry areas are better than others, but it'll eventually get better. In years to come, we'll look back and say, Jesus, that past is being acceptable now. That's just the way the future's going. All right. So are we happy enough? Sceneries, maybe keep them local. Aircraft, definitely keep them on this side if you can. Or, keep your community folder as empty as possible. Again, we're talking about routers now. Just be aware of your router. You could have options in it. There could be things on your router that are taking up all your internet and you're not aware of it, right? So check your router as well. Shame, you felt the 2020 photogrammetry loaded or looked better. That's the very same data. It depends maybe on how it loads with an LOD slider. But it's the very same data. So people say the photogrammetry is better in 2020. It's the same photogrammetry, lads. Same file, same data, right? It depends though. Has it loaded in the highest resolution available? That's where the thing comes into it, So, router quality does matter, by the way. If you're just using your default, ISP router, you could look at some third-party routers. And then you can look at boosters and all this kind of stuff as well. All right. Now, let me see. There's stuff we can also look in the background. This is aimed at more people who might be suffering trying to connect to Microsoft or they're not getting data quick enough, right? There are certain things you can do on your side, on your DNS, that could help the situation of making sure that, you're not getting delayed access to the likes of streaming. It's rare, relatively rare, the problem is on your side. More than likely, it's an Azure problem. Data coming from Azure into the system, or into, that's usually where the problem lies. It would be rare. However, there are some certain things you can check. You can go on to speed check what the ping, check the latency, check the wobble, check all of these things, and then you can go in and actually change some of your own DNS server settings. For example, you can choose Google on the DNS. Set the DNS rather than automatically. They're in your IP4 settings or IP6, usually IP4. Change it to Google, which is 8888. Or you can go Cloudflare, 1111. But that has a habit, it has had a habit of shutting down, right? But it does, having a more efficient DNS settings could improve the multiplayer sync and also the initial tile requests, as in photogrammetry or satellite coverage, right? If you don't know what they are, I don't think I can get into this without, showing it all off. Let me see. If I go into network, view network connections. Where's my mouse gone? Oh, come hither. We'll have a look here now. Properties, IP4. So what you could do in your IP4, so if you go to Ethernet, I can show you here actually. If you go into network connections, go to whatever your main Ethernet is, right? Right click it, properties, and go down to where it has Internet Protocol 4, IP4, properties. You can get IP settings assigned automatically if your network supports this capability. Otherwise, you need to ask your administrator. Depends on what your settings are. What you can do, see these obtain your DNS server addresses automatically. These are set for me automatically because my router does all that heavy lifting. So the PC on my system, I have it set to automatic. My server or my router dictates what the DNS is. However, you can put it in manually. Obtain DNS server address automatically. Don't worry about the IP address. So if your preferred server is going to be that of Google, that's going to be 8888. Why isn't that working? 8888 or 8.8.8.8. That's Google, or we can go Cloudflare, and you can horse them in. Try that, right? And just see. Go back into your speed test. Ookla do one. Go into your speed test, and then just see, is there any difference? You might find something, and suddenly that issue you were having with slow tiles could be gone. Could be, may not be, but it could be. Your ISP could be using their own DNS, and that could be crap, or it could be great. It could be better, depending on what it is and what you have, right? So you could have a look at that, Maybe an idea is to put the more nerdy stuff on the Patreon. Yeah, maybe, Roy, yeah. Well, there's certainly stuff. I want to keep the flight sim stuff open to our community, as in, it's open for everyone. You know what I mean? But yeah, some of the more nerdy stuff for getting the stuff to work, maybe. Yeah, great idea. Great idea. Zit, good morning. Thank you for all the asterisks. But have a look at that in your DNS. Just do a check right now. Go on to speedcheck.net, I think it is. Run a speed test or speed check. Go into your network, open your Ethernet, go into properties, check the DNS. If it's set to automatic, we'll put in those figures. All the 8s, as in 8888, and then 1111, and then flip them around. And as you flip them around, hit OK, give it a moment, test the speed again. Did you come up the road or did you come down the road? Did the jitter drop? Jitter is important, right? Have a look at it. Their DNS servers must have sensed them. Yeah, I think anything with dots, it's going to kind of freak out with. But that one's Google, the other one's Cloudflare. There are others, right? There are others. I leave mine on automatic because, well, as I said, my router's doing the heavy lifting. But that is something to check. If you are suffering, why is my scenery not loading or me blurry, or check that, right? Check that as well. But yeah, that's the idea. Also, we went into this earlier, the power settings, right? Make sure you disable energy efficient Ethernet and power setting mode. So again, go into network adapter, properties. How do we do this now? Is it configure? Power management. See this crack? Make sure these are unchecked. Do not allow the computer to turn off that device to save power. Make sure that doesn't happen. Also, if you're using a VPN, that can make downloading significantly slower. That will definitely make it slower. If you're using the sim via a VPN, it is going to be much slower loading in scenery and streaming because it has to go through the VPN server first. Then it goes into you. So yeah, 100%. You should show how to reset the network's settings in case something goes terribly wrong. Well, it won't go wrong. If you're only putting in a DNS, just go back in and just go automatic. That'll fix it. You can flush the DNS, but we're only talking about DNS settings. It's not even IP stuff, you know? But yeah, Zit, by all means, if you think we should, well, we will. But when it comes to DNS settings, shouldn't really have a problem. Shouldn't. So your power options, make sure that your computer can turn it on. Right. Now, we're done with that. Background apps. Windows startup. You need to go in. This is important. Go into Windows and type in startup apps. I need to be very careful of what's running here in the background. This might seem very trivial, but I'm telling you, this has a massive, massive impact on what's actually running, right? There are certain things on your PC that are going to run when you install them, and you mightn't even be using them. And every time they load, they're now taking up precious memory. A lot of the time when these apps close, they don't take the memory with them. It stays loaded in your RAM. Your RAM can't get rid of it, right? Now, there's other programs, but then the whole thing becomes counterproductive and you'll never fly again, you know? Be wary of what's running when your PC starts up. In here, you want to make sure, like if you use OneDrive or any of these, fine, but turn them off when you're going to be simming. The last thing you want is for cloud data syncing when you're flying. That's using your internet speed, it's using RAM, it's using CPU, and it's using your hard disks. Crazy to have that stuff turned on, right? Other things when it comes to background apps, if you have programs controlling your lights, right? So Corsair, you know, what do they call it? What's that program called? IQ. Unless you really want all your lights flashing and doing things, turn that stuff off, because that's talking to the internet. It's looking at the hard drives. It's also looking at your power management, and that's going on when your sim is going on. These are background apps that are actually causing a lot of impact to your sim, right? Another thing to consider is your Discord. And we use Discord extensively, but Discord can hog resources, especially if you're looking at a video or you're in a channel and someone's streaming, right? So there are things you can do. You can turn off the hardware acceleration mode, turn that off. So it just means your GPU won't be worrying about Discord. It's just going to worry about the sim, right? And the likes of all these startup programs, unless you absolutely need that program running, turn them off. You can always turn them on manually. The best way to do this, if I were to say, right, if you turn on your PC and you have Discord running and you have OneDrive running and then Navigraph pops up and then, you know, your favorite website pops up and then, you know, your lighting system pops up. They're all now using key resources, RAM especially, for what? Okay, if you're using them, great. But then you want to launch your sim has to use what's left. What I'd recommend, turn off all of the stuff, have little as possible loading when you turn on your computer, launch the sim first, then go off and open up everything else, because only then, there's a hierarchy, yeah? So the sim first, and then the rest of the gear can load in after it. If that makes sense, right? Not too bad if you have two PCs, but one PC you have no choice. Yeah, 100%. But I like my pretty lights, right? Also check your browser, keeping extensions running. 100%. Even browsers, internet browsers, Discord, clouds, all that background stuff can be detrimental to your sim. Stutters, not loading, CTDs, out of memory, even Wasom crashes. All of that has an impact, right? And I'll get into the Wasom stuff now in a while. Carnival, good to see it. Where is this now? Will this video somewhere viewable without a subscription? Yes, of course. This video will be live on YouTube after the fact. IQ could be needed if you set up some custom settings for keyboard and mouse. Yeah, you might need it, right? But turn off the lighting controls. You know what I mean? But if you're using IQ to run like buttons or stuff, do you need it? Do you need all of that software running to have a keybind? You can change the keybind. So try and launch the sim first. Would be my advice. Background apps. And then you might say, but Murph, I love having all these apps. I need all these apps. Grand. Invest in a small little tablet. The way RAM prices are now, it's cheaper to invest in a tablet. That's where you put your Navigraph. Let that be where you put your Discord. Even put your browser on it. That is a smart upgrade. If you don't operate a tablet or a laptop, get yourself a tablet or a laptop. Use that as a second PC. Only have your sim running on one PC with as little distractions as possible. It'll have a huge impact. Huge impact. Navigraph is brilliant. That'll work networked. It doesn't even care where you are. Once you're in the same network, boom, there you go. You got it. Volanta does the same-ish, right? Flight Tracker does the same. And then if you're saying, okay, well, what about Discord? Discord's, I mean, your audio can link with Discord via a tablet. And unless you're using voice channels or, push to talk, you don't really need it. Certainly listen in, right? Guinness, good to see you, buddy. Welcome in. Thank you for the subscribe. Even down to your web browser. Use a web browser that uses less resources. Chrome can eat more than Firefox. Yeah, well, Edge has gotten fairly good, I find. I think Edge is actually quite good, and I've tested these. Copilot, yeah, get rid of Copilot. But again, you start going into kind of Windows bloatware stuff. Just keep it closed. Get the sim open first, then you can go off and do your web browsing and all this kind of stuff. Or indeed, a tablet. Just have a tablet. And you might say, Merv, you can pick up a tablet for like $70. You can get a second-hand one cheaper. A tablet is going to do far more when it comes to the performance of your PC than anything else for that price point, right? And you can get tablets are gone cheap now, lads. They're gone where was this one I was looking at? What is it? The One Plus or something it's called? Or oh Jesus! Now large tablet, Lenovo, a large tablet, 20-inch tablet for €100. 20 inches. That's 2 iPads. That's nuts, right? Wait now, let's have a look. The One Plus is supposed to be very good. I've been reading reviews on that recently. Your Samsung Galaxy stuff, yeah, maybe if you're into them. There's this other crowd. They're in the UK, I thought. You get a decent tablet for 100% you would. Murph, all this turn on off sequencing reminds me of Apollo 13. 100%. Use your phone. Phone's a brilliant way to do it, yeah. There was a laptop or a tablet I was looking at. Charlie uses one. I was saying, Jesus, where did he get that? Q something, I think it's called. Hang on. We shall find out now. Hang on, we'll go down to where Charlie is. Now, I haven't used it, but I hear they're great, right? Let me see here now. So, why is it when you start looking for stuff, you can never find it? And then when you're never looking for it, it's always there. Why can't I see the gadgets that I'm looking for? Well, blast. There we go. Now. HonorPad X7. Have you heard of this joke before, lads? An HonorPad X7? For and these are a large tablet. These are a large tablet, right? What's the price of the gadgets? Buy. Select your country. Well, if we're in Europe, £90, right? It's Wi-Fi, 64 gigs, and it's using Snapdragon, which is fast on Android. £90. In euros, we're probably talking 110 quid. But it's a tablet. You get a tablet, suddenly now you're running your Navigraph, whatever it is that you run on your PC, including that of a web browser. It's phenomenal. Like that upgrade alone, when it stops background apps and you monitor the impact of the background apps in terms of using your internet, using your RAM, using your GPU, and also the disks. Your disks are moving, or your SSDs are doing all their stuff. And if you don't believe me, Task Manager right now, right? And if I have a look at it, I have 10 active apps. And of them, yes, Microsoft Flight Sim is using the most amount of resources. Or at least it's using resources in terms of the CPU, right? Microsoft Edge is running here beside it. That's almost the exact same impact as Microsoft Flight. What? Edge? Really? What's going on? Look at the IQ stuff popping up, right? Like, this is all impacting on your sim. All of it. So, the more of this stuff you get rid of, the better. As in, you offload it. Run it on a different device. A tablet for 90 quid? Lads, that's a no-brainer. 90 quid wouldn't even get you the or in the name RAM. Do you know what I mean? So, yeah. You can set the flight sim process to high priority in the task manager. Well, that's what game mode should be doing, right? And yes, you can use something like process lasso, to do that itself. If you want to move, you can do it, right? You can go into your flight sim, go by name, and if we go to, let me see here now, flight simulator. If we go to details, and then we right click and we go to set priority or affinity. Set priority is a high or real time. High is the best you want to do it. It might come up as above normal with game mode. But all you're basically doing is you're setting a rule set. This is usually handled automatically, right? You're setting a rule set for the CPU to say, hey, this is the most important process I have running. You make sure it gets all the resources first. All right? But you need to be careful then when it comes to this stuff. If you're using something like a process lasso and you're saying, right, turn everything else off or run it at minimum power, I just want the sim running, great. But now if you've Navigraph running, if you have, other add-ons, little nav map, or maybe there's stuff interacting with the sim, they're now running slower. Your sim is now waiting for them to load. So you got to be careful with that stuff as well. You know what I mean? Maybe you missed it. IQ can be replaced by Signal RGB. It is the light version of IQ and replaces all the RGB stuff. Nice. For me, IQ, I don't mind it. I use the Xenon, so I need IQ. It's the only thing that powers the Xenon, right? The Xenon Edge. But yeah. Yeah, need IQ for Xenon Edge, though. Yeah, if you didn't like IQ, yeah, you can get a replacement. Well found, Roy. Well found. I say. Right, anyway, so that was background services. Windows Update, make sure you do that before or after your flight sim. Don't have it looking for updates when you're flying. Cloud syncing, turn off all that stuff, right? NVIDIA background services stuff. Again, there's telemetry running in the NVIDIA app. I've always said don't use the app. And there's also a background container. They are light. The app has gotten way better. I know when the app first came out, I was like, this thing is just bloatware. It's gotten better. So I wouldn't worry with it too much. But yeah, the RGB software, it's a massive hidden CPU drain. Armory, Crate, IQ, MSI Center, Razer, they poll your hardware constantly. Even on high-end CPUs, it does have a measurable background usage. Overlays, the Xbox overlay, turn it off. Discord overlay, turn it off. Steam overlay, turn it off. And even the GeForce overlay, I would turn them off. Because we're all now fighting for position using your resources. You know what I mean? Murph, do you have independently powered USB hub for your devices? For some, yes. For some, no. It depends on what your power supply unit on your PC is. Can it handle certain peripherals? But I do have powered hubs, yes, for some of them, CPU scheduling and core isolation and core contention. Again, you can look at that. I found leaving things on balanced with AMD works better. On Intel, high performance, maximum performance. That's what works for your CPU, right? AMD manages itself and it does a damn good job at it. Intel, Windows can manage it and it does a fairly good job. All right. So you want to pause your cloud, check your Windows Update, close your browsers, make sure there's nothing downloading in the background, Windows updates and all this kind of stuff. Go Ethernet connected. Takes about 2 minutes before your sim, and it'll save you a lot of kind of headaches. Do you know what I mean? So if we're happy enough with that, let's get into the settings. You're probably wanting to know what I use for settings. Now, bearing in mind, lads, these settings are based on my hardware, right? And my hardware, well, it's relatively beefy hardware, right? But I'll tell you what each kind of thing does and how it does and all the jazz. Okay? About to do Haneda to Orlando flight. Nice one, Alfred. It all adds up. Each one is not bad on their own, but when they're joined together, yeah, 100%. 100%. Roy, I need to look at that Signal RGB. It looks pretty cool, man. I need to check it out. Yeah, pretty cool. Right, options. Display mode. The question was full screen or do we go windowed? I tend to go full screen rather. I just use full screen. I can go windowed, but I use full screen. HDR, I don't use it because streaming, it creates a problem, right? It's a pain in the ass. I have HDR pass through, but I can't get the colors right. I can kind of get them close, but not right. So I leave HDR off. If you have the option of HDR, turn it on because the sim looks fabulous in high dynamic range. All right. Exposure composition, that's up to your own liking. Basically, it's like a exposure slider, right? Brighter, dimmer, depending on what way you want your screen to be. Okay. Full screen resolution, I run 3840 by 2160. You don't need to go any higher. You can, but you don't need to, right? There's freaking 8K there if we want to push it that high, right? It depends on what your hardware, what, is it a TV, a monitor? Are you going through capture cards? All this kind of stuff. Now we get into the crux of it. Anti-aliasing. So anti-aliasing is basically the methods of which it uses anti-aliasing. We have three options. We have TAA, which is temporal anti-aliasing. You have NVIDIA's deep learning system something, right? Which is using AI to produce higher resolution frames. Hey, Lenny's here. Good to see you. And then you have AMD's FSR, which is AMD's version of what DLSS is. They're quite similar, right? It's a way of it's to stop kind of jagged lines and flickers and any sort of deterioration when it comes to how smooth the image is. And they would use shimmering. That's the word. Anti-aliasing is the process to anti-alias or anti-aliasing, right? I use TAA. Temporal is quite good. And I use TAA with frame gen. If I wasn't using frame gen, I'd probably go DLSS, right? Not necessarily screen tearing. We'll get into screen tearing in a minute. This is more to do with like shimmerings. Let's say you're parked at an airport and the fence is reflecting at you and it kind of looks weird. You know what I mean? So yeah. Denchik, welcome in. So you know the story. Like it's anti-aliasing. This is going to, your mileage will vary. I use TAA. If I need to, I'll use DLSS, but usually I go TAA. Render scaling, I keep it at 100% because I don't need to change it. Right, I'm happy enough with it. Lower scaling improves your performance. Higher scaling will use a little bit more. Right. So there's a couple of recommendations here. So you can scale the resolution of the 3D scene. User interface is unaffected by this. Lower scaling improves your performance. Higher scaling improves quality. It's recommended to use temporal anti-aliasing when below 100%. To get the best super sampling quality, more than 100%, super sampling would be better. All right. I get a frame rate FPS mismatch leading to ghosting on DLSS. Yeah, 777, you're not the only one. That's where the issue is. DLSS and frame gen, a byproduct of all of that is ghosting, right? It's just where the technology is. DLSS 4.5 was to change that. It kind of did in places, but not great. There'll be further updates, right? So I'd recommend, if you're happy enough with how sharp everything is in your sim, I mean, we can bring this render scaling up. It'll make it look damn good. But I'm in 4K anyway, so there's not much room I need to do, right? AMD Fidelity FX Sharpening. It's using its own CAS algorithm to adjust how sharp each pixel is. Again, it'll squeeze a little bit more detail, right? Especially if you have an AMD system, but it'll work on any system. That option should be there regardless. And I keep mine at around 50. If I want to punch it, I can go to 100. There is a small FPS trade-off on how sharp you want things to work, right? Maximum frame rate. This is where we get into screen tearing and also limiting what your sim can do, right? We're going Bob Ross you now. So if the capabilities of your simulator, if the capabilities of your hardware, right? I don't know how big this will be, but sure, we'll give it a blast. So let's say, for example, the capabilities of your machine that's wrong. In a given flight sim setup, right, are like this. This is This is like the maximum you can achieve, right? Why can't I just draw in a straight shagging line? Brush. There we go. Now have a look at this, right? That's also supposed to be as straight as the other fella. But I'll show you now in a second. We'll use purple to be optimum. Now there's method to me madness here, so bear with me. So when we're talking about locking a frame rate, if your PC is, or your monitor is going to dictate what your refresh rate is going to be, okay? So for most people, 60 frames, that's what you want. Or you can get 120 frames, right? Or you're in between. You're between kind of 50 hertz US, or you have a gaming monitor at 144 hertz. You have something different, right? Now bear with me. 60 frames, locking a 60 frame to a 60 hertz refresh rate isn't technically locking it, because you're basically, your sim is going to say, okay, I can now draw X amount of frames per second based on the refresh rate of the hardware attached, right? So if you have a 60 hertz, well, you're going to get 60 FPS. Now it's not necessarily true, because, well, you can actually get 120 FPS on 60 hertz, kinda, right? Don't worry about the science. This is the rule we stick by, right? This is the rule we stick by. If you have a 60 hertz monitor or TV, lock your frame rate to 59. Trust me. If you have 120, lock it to 119, right? And if you're either 50 or 144, lock it to 49 or to 143. You will see the difference. Now, for me, I've to be slightly different. I would be the exception to the rule. And the reason why this is important is I've 120 hertz going through a 4K capture card, going back out into 120 hertz. And when I do that, I get nothing but screen tearing. Why? Because there's a yoke called EDID, which went off and bought a gadget to fix it that didn't fix it. So it now lives in the drawer, right? So for me, what I have to do, I set everything up to 120, I push it through, I capture it in 120, but then I push it back out in 60. Which is, it might sound odd, but I am getting 120 frames. And it's, I know it's 120 frames because the capture card detects it, right? But this, what this will do, this will lock the frame rate to that given number. If you say 59, let's say your resources now are constantly going up and down, up and down, up and down, and they're trying to hit that 60, but they can never hit 60, right? Well, don't lock it at 60, drop it down a little bit. What you want to do, you want to cap the performance and computing power of your system, right? So that it's stable. It's not trying to overachieve once or twice hitting, 60 hertz, when in reality, you're only doing 44, 45. This is crucially important. And the reason being is, this is where you start getting stutters, micro stutters, and the sim just isn't It's the TPHI. We can take you shagging nowhere. Let me tidy up this mess here. Bloody hell. You want to make sure you're getting performance at all times. You need performance at all times, right? These are absolutely terrible. If you lock your frame rate to this level here, right? And you don't let it go above this, it means your computer power is not going to be going 100% all the time. It'll find the happy medium. I'm trying to change the picture here, something fierce. It'll find the happy medium, meaning that it's not working as hard to achieve slightly slower frames. This brings more stability and more fluidness. If you didn't do it this way, your sim is constantly throttling in order to hit that highest possible FPS or refresh rate. Never going to hit there. And all you're doing is, well, sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't get it. It's too fluid. It's moving around too much. Yeah. If you drop the frame rate, or if you lock the frame rate, we lock the frame rate by doing a couple of things. We either say the maximum frame rate, or we'll put on a vertical sync lock. Right? Hey, Heisenberg, good to see you. Does that make sense? If you're running a normal 60 hertz TV, I would put your maximum frame rate, if you're getting 60 hertz, right? Lock it at 59. If you're getting 40 hertz or 40 FPS, well, maybe lock it at 30. The idea being is you want the sim to be stable. Forget about chasing these higher numbers, because by doing so, it's giving you this sort of a result, shaking and not smooth. Lower the shagging thing and it'll work better. So in my case, I'm telling it, I want max frame rates, lock it at 60. And you might be saying, well, how does that work? Because I'm using friggin' the refresh rate that comes across is 120. You lock it to half of what it should be and then it doubles it back up. 777, pretty much, because we're using frame gen. So when it comes into frame gen, now frame gen is available on RTX cards, the 4 series upwards. Right? So I lock everything to 120 and I get 120. I rarely drop below 120 frames. And for a 5090, I wouldn't expect that less, right? So I tend to go, now I can push this up to ×4. I'm still going to get 120 frames because it's locked. It's not going to go, 240. My TV can't handle 240 hertz. But if it could, well, then it would get there to 5090. Right? 777, now I use 60, so your limiter is at 30. Yes, so if you have a 60 hertz TV and your frame gen available, lock your frame rate to 30 and then use 2 times frame rate. And you will, I'm telling you, you will have butter smooth performance. Butterly smooth. And then you can get into, your AMD sharpening, and you can even maybe change the render resolution to really sharpen it. And it's cinema quality then. You know what I mean? You can't use frame gen with a 3090. I don't believe so. You just can't. But if at least I don't think you can. My understanding is the frame rate multiplayer. Oh wait, there is an add-on you can get. There is, sorry. Yeah. You can use FSR frame gen. Yes, you can. So if you're on your 3090 Heisenberg, use FSR frame gen. And that'll do the same. And for 2020, there's a mod. Right? Yeah, it works great. There you go. All right, good stuff. So yeah, use your FSR stuff, or there is a mod you can get. I know you can go into your NVIDIA inspector and change some stuff. That'll turn it on as well. Right? Patrick says you should lock on a base FPS you can always achieve. 100%. Yeah, Gav, you can do it 100%. Even with a 2000 series. Yeah, you can do it on 2080. What settings? What's your refresh rate on your TV or monitor? That's what dictates this, lads. The refresh rate on your monitor is going to dictate what you can do here, within reason. You have 180 hertz. Well, you don't need to use all the 180 hertz. I'd say lock your frame rate to 60 and use frame gen by 2. That's going to be 120 hertz. If you have a stable 30, lock it to 25. Yeah, or even like 29, right? One under where you're constantly getting. That's my recommendation. All right? So Murph, were you personally setting 119 of 120 as you mentioned before? You can do. If you're using things like G-Sync, you don't need to. Or AMD Sync. What do they call? What do AMD call their sync? You have G-Sync and then you have AMD FreeSync or something it's called. You don't need to drop it one down. That's what that technology should do that itself. You know what I mean? But on my sim, 120 hertz is available based on my TV, right? And my capture card. I tell the sim to say, right, hold it at 60 and frame rate double it. And then they get me 120 hertz. And it is butterly smooth. It's just the way it works, right? Give that a shot and see what you think. Your 1% low should be lower than your FPS. Yeah. Look at the NVIDIA frame view tool. You sent me a link. Good man, Roy. Sound, we'll have a look. Then you have VSync. Now, vertical sync is another setting you could use. I've mine off because I'm using G-Sync is active and I've locked my frame rate. I don't need VSync, right? And you can go monitor refresh, half the monitor refresh, a third of the monitor refresh. Whatever the settings are best for you, that you're making sure you're not getting any sort of screen tearing. However, I would be looking at the max frame rate solution and then, double it back up at frame gen. I would do that more than VSync. You should get better performance if you do it using the using frame gen. You should do. There's also going to be a trade-off for frame gen. You're going to get ghosting. It's just the way that's where the technology is. But it will get better. All right. Now we'll move down. Some of the settings we have here, dynamic settings. I leave these off. I want to be in control of my settings. Dynamic settings was Microsoft Flight Sim's way to do the auto FPS. And the fact of the matter is, dynamic settings will actually be faster than auto FPS because auto FPS has to go in and interpret using the what the sim parameters are. So dynamic settings, well, you can actually use dynamic settings with auto FPS to get a fairly good result, right? You can't enable VSync because you're using frame gen. Yeah. That's what I mean. I would go with frame gen over VSync. Island Sim Pilot has a video, DLSS 4.5 ghosting explained why frame times matter more than FPS. No, I haven't seen it. But that's what I do anyway, Jalagod. Like, I don't chase FPS. I look for smoothness. Smoothness is going to be indicated using the main thread. And I'll show you the FPS counter. That's what we're chasing. We want greens, nothing but greens. That's how you, in my opinion, correctly set up your graphics. You know what I mean? And you do it usually in a heavy area. But with all the frame gen, all the extra tech turned off, just the sim, you load in what you can until you get your successful and achievable frame rate, and you lock it in, then you turn on all the frame gen and all this. Then you know you're going to be at best performance no matter what happens. No matter what happens, your system shouldn't drop the ball, So our global rendering, there's always going to be questions here. This depends on your system, of course. I'm using my terrain level of detail of 215. I find this gives me the best visual versus performance, or performance versus visuals. Off-screen terrain pre-caching, I have it on Ultra. Now, I have the scope because I've 96 gig of RAM. I can have this on Ultra and not worry about it. It also makes for a smoother flight. You can turn this down. Some people turn it off. If your internet is fast enough, turn it off, right? Displacement mapping, this is a huge one. This is, it used to be like multiplayer wake turbulence. Now it seems to be displacement mapping. If you're getting stutters and bad FPS, turn that off. Displacement mapping, basically, that's when you want to put tracks across sand or grass or snow. You put in a couple of rocks and things on the ground. If you're flying airliners, make sure that puppy's turned off. You will never need it. Not on airliners. All right? So displacement mapping, turn it off. You will, it has it impacts on both your FPS and also on the smoothness of the sim. All right. Buildings, trees, plants, rocks, and grass. Medium is more than enough, or high. Ultra is a waste of resources. It just is a waste of resources. High is more than enough. These are my settings. If you think my sim looks decent, these are my settings, right? Yeah, 100% right. Objects level of detail, I use 140. Again, that works well for me. Anything lower, you'll see pop in. Anything higher, you get a bit of degradation. All right. Volumetric clouds, I leave on ultra. I probably don't need it on ultra, but like the clouds are like, they're so important to me when I'm flying. Displacement mapping should be. Yeah, DP, displacement. Shout out here to Dougal, because he said, Murph, lower your texture resolution. So I used to have this on ultra. Drop it down one. Just drop it down. If you're on ultra, drop it down one. If you're on high, drop it down to medium and restart your simulator. This will have a huge impact on your VRAM. Huge impact. The texture resolution. And it's hard to notice the difference, right? So if you find that you're right on the limit of your VRAM, and that's before page file sizes and all this. If you're running under pressure with VRAM, turn down your texture resolution. All right. Anisotropic filtering, it depends on your hardware. 8 is usually good enough, right? I've mine on 16. 2 works. Water waves, if you're going to be flying over the friggin', continent, you might need them. Turn them down. I leave them. Ray trace shadows, this can have a bit of an impact. Sometimes I have this on or off, depending on what way the drivers are. I leave it on for now, and they look nice. Shadow maps, 2K for the maps, and then terrain shadows are 256. Again, you can turn it up, I think 3, so 512 is the highest. Oh no, it's not, Jesus. We can go 2K for the terrain. No, that's an overkill. I wouldn't worry too much. I might put it onto 512. Contact shadows high, windshield effects high, ambient occlusion high. Ambient occlusion, you can drop to medium, right? Again, this is more graphics card aim stuff. A good rule of thumb is, whatever the sim tries to, the sim will say, based on your hardware, you can have high. Well, rule of thumb is, change it to medium, and then add 1 or 2 things back up to high. That's a good starting point for all of this. If your sim reckons you can do things on ultra, drop it down to high, and then you can throw 1 or 2 things up. Don't go with the recommendation the sim is giving you. If you want better performance, go 1 below what the sim thinks you can do, and then you can add things in. You can use programs. NVIDIA has it, the game optimization. Usually I stay away from all of that. It makes a balls of it. Whatever the sim reckons you can do with your hardware, you tell it do 1 less, and then you can go back in and start, umphing things up. But again, it's all well and good changing all of these settings. We need to know what the impact is going to be. So we're going to explain them here quickly, but then we're going to get into the sim. We're going to talk about them. Reflections, again, depending on what your hardware can do, your graphics card, reflections usually are of a big issue for hardware, right? Motion blur, that's a user preference. It does eat a lot of frames though, right? Depth of field, I'd leave that on. I like that bokeh effect. Glass cockpit refresh rate, your CPU, they have fixed this. This used to be a frame rate killer. It's running fairly well now. I keep mine on high, right? Because the sim doesn't know you're planning an INI A350 flight. Exactly. Characters quantity, high. Characters variety, medium. Character quality, low. Now, character quantity, this is to do with like secondary characters, co-pilots, passengers, right? The variety, I don't need it on full whack. I tend not to use these anyway, right? I don't use characters, but I can't turn them off. Oh, I can. Wait, do I need them on? Characters quality. Why were they on? Oh, wait, hang on. So that's us running around on the ground. Yeah, never mind. So I keep the quantity and variety. Yeah, that's fine. Airport services variety, I keep it on low. Parked aircraft, leave it off. Aircraft traffic quantity on ultra and traffic variety on ultra, right? And then road traffic, I have it on high. Sea traffic is off because I use seafront simulations. That works excellent. See this seatbelt visibility? I'm sure when everyone saw that, they were like, what? Let's just explain something here. This setting for seatbelts, if you have a seatbelt, be it in the cockpit or, along the cabin, well, the seatbelt is an object, but underneath it, it's drawing many more objects for shadows. So they actually figured out that, well, hang on, seatbelts could be a huge VRAM and FPS problem. So turn it off. Seatbelt visibility, turn it off. Because when you see a seatbelt, there could literally be thousands of objects for shadows. Turn it off. Not needed, right? So make sure that's turned off. Language, broken English, bit of Irish, French, the odd time. Sound settings, default output communication. I keep all this default. The headphone simulation, they still didn't fix this. I want this as a button in the sim. Sometimes it works. Loudness limiter if you want. VHF signal degradation, I have that on, right? Because it sounds good. Warning sounds in external view, I turn that off, right? I should really have it on based on my flying. Character voices I have off. I don't want to listen to ATC. I use say intentions or VATSIM. Aircraft engines. I've other aircraft sounds turned right down. Right? I might turn them back up now because some aircraft, they were just too loud and I couldn't think straight. But they seem to have fixed a lot of that, so I'll turn them back up a bit. User interface, yeah. Environment, yeah. Music, don't play music, but if it did, that's where that lives. Right? Multiplayer voice chat doesn't work. It's not a thing. Right? Online stuff. Photogrammetry is on. Traffic type off. I don't bother with traffic. Live weather on. Multiplayer. Now, do you know what I must do? I'm going to change this. Show multiplayer aircraft in close proximity. I'm now going to get rid of that. And I'm going to see. They'll be temporarily hidden from view to prevent a visual obstruction. Let's see what happens there. Multiplayer replication models. Now, I've mine on simplified. It loads a lightweight optimized model prioritizing performance. High fidelity loads the full fidelity model of the aircraft. The problem is, simplified should be working, but the lookup table that says 4-engined equals this, you know, at the moment it says helicopter equals 4-engine Boeing jet, and it loads in a Boeing when you want to see a helicopter. So the lookup table is shagged. They need to fix that, right? So I leave mine on simplified. There is a massive performance impact if you go to high fidelity. If you're only flying with 1 or 2 people, yeah, keep it on high fidelity. But if you're flying with a group, keep it on simplified, lads. It's just not worth it. The performance impact it's causing you is huge, right? Huge. Communication, enable voice chat. This audio chat stuff, has anyone got this working? I've never been able to use it. Voice chat output, that's all okay. Convert incoming text, don't bother with any of these. Don't bother with any of those. Rolling cache. We spoke about rolling cache earlier on. I tend to go with 64 gigs, so I type in 64 and make sure your rolling cache location is on the same fast drive. If you put your rolling cache on a slower drive, it's a recipe for disaster, right? Yeah, you never know. There might be fellow simmer with the same concerns. Yeah. Voice not working at all. Is somebody told or talked to a sub on this? Yeah. Like, how do you connect with voice? You know, you have options up here for your friends. Hope this doesn't crash. I've never had this player-to-player voice thing work. Am I missing something? Am I the only one, lads, or have you got it working? Regarding the UI, I wish they could change the minimum text slider to a lower font size. Yeah. Does anyone know, is that, I'd say you're playing with fire enabling that. Yeah. You know? Hey, Rogue Nation, good to see you. You don't know what you'd hear. Yeah, well, I've never got it working. I've never seen it working. You know what I mean? But anyway, rolling cache is important. Data consumption, if you do have bandwidth limits, right, be aware of it, but I tend to leave this unlimited. Again, if you have bandwidth limits turned on, that's going to slow down what your sim is showing. So check that option. Make sure it's set to unlimited. Unless you're on a metered connection, right? Camera options, this is where the whole thing gets mad bananas, because Chase Plane has replaced pretty much all of this, right? Stephen Bond, good to see you, Stephen. Camera selection. these are my settings. So camera selection, the default camera during the flight is the cockpit. Quick view, I would want to hold the input to enter quick view mode rather than toggle it. Smart camera, again, is a hold or toggle. It's a toggle. I don't want to be sat there holding the thing, right? Zoom function is manual, and then focus mode is toggle. Cockpit camera selection, wide angle camera is positioned close to the pilot's seat. Again, chase plane has replaced pretty much all of this, but you can also adjust the height settings for default cockpit cameras. But you can do this, just putting in your own basic custom views. You know what I mean? It's recommended. I would delete the rolling cache once a month. Once a month, definitely after a sim update. But put it this way: if you add in new scenery, you'd probably want to be deleting the rolling cache as well, especially if it's a scenery in an area you've already pre-cached, right? Zoom speeds, camera shake. Adjust whether the cockpit camera moves slightly when the aircraft is moving. Again, FS Realistic does this. Chase plane does all this. Don't need to worry about it. This home cockpit mode button doesn't work. Places the camera in the center of the cockpit and disables the virtual cockpit. Does anyone know, does this work? How does one clear the rolling cache? Wazzy, with the sim turned off, go into your flight sim folder, its root folder, and you'll find it in there. Yeah, no, we know it's for panel builders, but like this doesn't work. Any aircraft I try and turn this on, it still loads into 3D virtual cockpit. Weirdness. Unless they fixed it. I don't think they did. Flight model, set it and forget it. Keep it on modern. Flight interface, this is what you can see on the screen. Again, I can do all this with flow. The HUD, I leave off. Don't bother with the HUD. Advanced options, this is where you can go into dev mode. We'll be going into that in a while. State reports, so just like issues. We'll ask them at FS Weekend. Yeah. Package reorder tool, that's handy for some scenery files. You can go in here, and then you have third person view. Assistances. Now these are kind of the realism settings I use if we'll have a quick look down through it. Basically, everything is turned off except for hot air balloons moored basket is on because they are the devil. I can't fly hot air balloons, but all assists I have are turned off. Display active waypoint, I have that on depending on what I'm doing for a mission if I'm in the career mode, right? Now, realism. I've disabled crash damage. I've disabled aircraft stress damage. I've disabled engine stress damage. Sometimes I turn that on depending on the aircraft. Icing is on. Unlimited fuel is off. Turbulence medium is working pretty well. Wake turbulence is off. G effect is off. And then everything else is off. I've very little things turned on in the assistance. Crash damage because it's no. Aircraft stress, no. Engine damage you might want to have on. But it depends on the add-ons that you're flying. All right. The controls, we'll be here till the cows come home. But when it comes to controls, how this works is you have a device list on the left-hand side. Right. That's your hardware. So the idea behind this is, well, okay, select what hardware you want to use. Then we'll figure out what you want to use it for. That's the brain behind this. Not the easiest thing in the world to follow. And you have options here. Click on the gear. You can rename, deactivate, go into hardware settings. That's where you can set your control curves and response curves and all this kind of stuff. Right? So for instance, if I were to look at me Windwing, not me Windwing, sorry, me Warbird. This will load up now in a second. But if we look at our control responses, these are the settings I have. So there's my left, right. It's not fully linear. I want that small bit of dead space in there. And if I look at the Y, again, I've put in a small bit of dead space in there. The reason being is I don't want the thing to be super jumpy. I want to calm it down a bit, right? And while we're here, what we're going to do, I'm going to go into my rudder pedals. So pendular rudder pedals. And if we have a look at the Z axes, see this? It's a nice fluid motion, but I'm going to bring in a small bit of a dead zone here. And the reason why I'm doing this, because the sim at the moment is a divil for trying to keep it on the straight and narrow. right? And we can probably, if we wanted to, we can dial out some sensitivity there, maybe 0.2 and maybe 0.2. Right? I need to go +2. Oh no, it'd be -2. It just means then it's allowing you have more input control on your rudder pedals. Now, it depends on your rudder pedals, right? That to me, that feels a little bit better. It's so very rare in flight sim, unless you're doing aerobatic stuff or military stuff, it's going to be so very rare you would ever need full deflection of any control surface. Hard left, hard right, full up, full down. You never do that. Airliners definitely not. Some GA maybe, but usually no. So that means focus on giving yourself more control using finite control. Much smaller inputs rather than, oh yeah, here's the full axes. This can literally change how an aircraft feels, right? So you want better control over a longer distance than very shaky, jaggedy control over a shorter distance. Does that make sense? So I'd recommend that. Just having a dead zone or a null zone, right, just means, well, I can have tiny movements with the pedals. It's not going to respond. All right. But then when it comes to the movement of these pedals, I want them to be a little bit more fluid. Now, you can do this from the hardware or from the software outside of the sim, but the sim does it pretty well, does a good job, right? So, what about a Murph zone, right? There's other controls in here with Toby. There's all your hardware controls. Everyone's going to have either their default or they're going to have their own controls, right? Now, my controls, when I got flights in 2024, I deleted everything. Every single control I deleted. Why? Because I want my controls in there. My controls are based on X-Plane. All the buttons I use, the inputs, where everything is, it's based on what I use in X-Plane. And it's, to me, it makes total sense. Because I've been using them for so long, right? So that's what I use for all my controls. They're custom to me. So when I sit in and I try to use a default sim, I'm shagged. I'm like, oh Jesus, how do you do that? Right? Tell about hidden repeat and toggle combinations. For what specifically, Ross? Touch pointer. What's this? Touch pointer? There's no... What the hell is that? What's a touch pointer? Interesting. Oh, is that this thing? Wait now. Search. Search by input. Oh, it's not that device. Is that your graph doodads? No! What hardware is that now? That's real strange. Touch pointer? The Corsair screen? Really? No. Maybe, well, maybe it is actually. How do we use that as a... Jeez, that could be interesting, couldn't it? Ross has it as well? Okay. Interesting. Windows stylus or something. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Is it for your graph doodads though? Brilliant. Right. The controls that I've set up, they make sense to me. One thing I'll say, if you're using custom camera views or inside, we'll do it in chase plane. Always bind that to an easy button. So no matter what is happening, you have a button very close by that you can press and you're back looking where you're supposed to. All right. We can change. So example, you can set controls to a particular aircraft, or you can set it to all types of aircraft. You could say, right, we can set this to all fixed wing, or we can set this to all helis, or we can set it to all aircraft, right? So we can do all that, which is pretty cool. So there are your controls. The default ones are good enough. Accessibility, minimum text size, 18. I don't bother with any of these. The narration are turned off. Subtitles, don't use. Effects and animations, controller vibrate, don't use them, right? If you're in an Xbox controller and that's your main controller, yeah, use that, right? It's related to MetaQuest link. Okay. Show the white dot and cursor. No. Allow 2D cursor on all peripherals. No, don't use it either. So don't use any of that. And then you get into VR settings, which we won't cover today, right? So in the main menu, we're going to select a Cessna, and we're going to where do we go? We'll chase all the planes over here. Look, we'll go over and what was it? KBMA, YBMA. We were here last night. We're going to load in here. Oh, actually, hang on. We want to do VOR stuff. Where's good for VOR? Let's have a look. It's got to be the States. Got to be the States. It's just better VOR in the States. They've way more of them. Let's see here. Reload into Dallas, Fort Worth, Jackson. Go to CAGs. Right, Augusta Regional. We'll load into Augusta here for a second. Now, when you're setting up your flight, depending on what you're doing, right? Weather and time, I always put mine on custom. You can still select live, but on custom, you've full control over it. Air traffic, I leave this off. This is your air traffic, AI aircraft, boats. I leave it off. There's no need for it, right? Multiplayer is either going to be on all players or group. You can go live, but it's always either going to be all players when we're doing a group flight, or off if you just want to fly on your own. I'll leave mine on all. Real time, real weather. Let's load in and see what happens. Oh, the weather's not great, but sure, it's okay.
Parking brakes to request ground services.
If you want live weather and custom time, add 1 day ahead as historic weather hits you. Yeah, if you want live weather and custom time, add 1 day. Yeah, well, I'm lost. If you want live weather and custom time, sorry, live weather and custom time, go a day ahead. Now, yeah, it makes sense. So if you want to go custom time. Now, this airplane didn't load. So here's another bug. Because we need to turn it back on again. I have to do this every single time. I need to report this to them. Yeah, it's a good start, isn't it? And the sim this could crash now. Oh no, she's still alive. Right. That was a great start. Right. It didn't load in me Cessna 172, look. Disabled. Why are you disabled? Enable. Don't know why it does this. Poor old Cessna. So it remember to disable the 2024 version. It doesn't remember to disable, or doesn't remember to re-enable the 2020 version. Very strange. I'll try this again. Down to CAGs we go. And it doesn't remember to save turn off the shagging clouds. Now I don't know, are these Sim Update 5 things they're working on? Hope so. Flight conditions, custom, all players, live. Right, we'll try it again.
You need to set park.
Hopefully we have an airplane this time. Huzzah! There's our airplane.
You need to set parking brakes to request ground services.
Okay, GSX. Right.
You need to set parking brakes
Let the
to
sim
request
load.
ground services.
Okay, yeah, it still resets to default. Lovely. Yeah, they need to fix that. Right, so here we are in our beloved Cessna. Now what we're going to do in our menu, we're going to go to settings, we're going to go to advanced, and we're going to open up developer mode. All right. Inside dev mode, okay, there's an update available, grand. Options.
Parking brakes to request ground services.
DSX, be quiet now. We're going to go to debug and display our FPS, which is up here, right? And then we'll exit dev mode. So what we're looking for here is basically how everything's loading. Now note, I'm using FrameGen. What I'd recommend, don't use FrameGen or any of that stuff, and this is where you want to tweak your settings. If you get them right without using FrameGen, then you can turn back on FrameGen and you're just going to get more and more and more performance. Okay, so you can see here now, the main thread, well, it doesn't look terribly happy, right? It just doesn't look terribly happy. So we're going to go into our settings here and start playing around with things. Hang on, wait, we're on 4 times and we're not getting 120 frames. What's going on there? That's very strange. Okay, well, we're locked to 120, but you can see it's not very smooth, is it? No, it's fine. It is smooth. But I know, looking at that, this is potentially a recipe for disaster. So let's go into our settings now, and we're going to bring all this back. We're going to cam the VOR out of this. We're going to turn off the max frame rate. We're going to turn off DLSS, and anti-aliasing. We're going to leave it alone. And turn off VSync. Resume. Now, as things stand, we're getting about 60 odd frames natively, and everything looks relatively green. That there is painting a fairly good picture, right? But in terms of smoothness, well, I mean, it's smooth, but it could be smoother, right? So there's a couple of changes since I was in here last. It's not liking. So let's go in and start messing with them. So what did we change since? Well, FrameGen is off. Global rendering quality. So remember this one, displace mapping? I'm gonna turn it off for a second and let the sim kind of just chill out for a moment. See the way now we're pretty much up to about like 70 frames, and how much smoother things are. So displacement mapping does have an impact, right? It just has an impact. So we kind of need to watch for that, lads. But I like it on, so I'm going to use it. Now, what else can we do here? So put that guy back on. The shadows I've increased. Terrain shadows I've brought up. So I'm going to put them back down to where they were. I think everything else is pretty much where I had it. Okay, save this. Give it a moment. Usually takes about 30 seconds or so for things to calm down. Now it's not really liking that. It's not as wonderful and calm and green, right? I'd recommend to switch back to your previous setting. Performance between CPU and GPU were well balanced. No, they were. But this is all about getting our settings right. We're using TAA. Don't change anything over there. It's all just down in these settings. So if we were to say, right, well, let's change some things here. So we're using terrain level of distance. We'll drop it down to 200. Usually make one setting, go back and check. And now we wait.
Set parking brakes to request ground services.
Okay. It seems to be improving a bit. Developer mode is grayed out for me. Oh. Developer mode is grayed out. Launch the sim admin mode, Ahmad bro, and see what happens. Right, so that's a little bit better. Little bit better. So we know we're getting slightly better performance. I made one little slider change, right? Okay. What else can we do? Are we going to get much more than that? That's the question. And just to show you the difference, right? If I were to say, well, look, I tell you what, let's bring the render resolution up to 8K. And now this is going to be lovely and sharp, right? But I'm now only pushing out half the frames. But in terms of on-screen fidelity and detail, I mean, this is going to be this is top of the world. But you can see the impact it has. So in terms of how sharp things are, it's not going to get much sharper than this. I mean, it's basically trying to render 8K here, right? GPU load is now sitting on 99%. Now we can change the weather, because the weather, that weather is using up resources. So if you calm it down a bit, not loading half the clouds will help. I mean, that's as sharp as I've seen the sim ever. But that's not sustainable, right? Alright. So we'll drop it back down to 100. Everything resets, including me reshade. And we give it a moment. And that's ideal. It's a little bit not as sharp, but that's still pretty good. So my recommendation here is, lads, with everything, with all the bells and whistles turned off, as in your frame gen and DLSS, keep all that off, get in and try and stabilize your frame rate. I know I can hit, well, it's hitting 70 at the moment, but like jiggery pokery 60. I know the lowest there was 58 because I went underground, right? So I know I can hit 60. Now, if I were to lock this to 50, which we can try, max frame rate on, let's lock it at 50, right? And without going into frame gen, it's smoother. You get the idea, right? We drop it down and lock it in. At 50, I know I can go higher than 50. So we're gonna lock this at 60. I'm then gonna turn on frame gen. TIA was already on, right? We're gonna hit save, resume. And just give it a moment. Let it all stabilize. It's sitting now on 120 FPS. And it's butter smooth. Flipper Alloy, good to see it. So you know, the advantage of using the default sim stuff, locking it in place and then turning on your frame gen and all the other jazz, this is going to get you way more performance. Gibbo! I heard there were pictures of willies. I had to jump in. There wasn't pictures of willies. There were graphs. There were graphs, right? Frame gen is ×4. You should do it ×2. On a 5090, frame gen 4. Don't go with 2. On a 5090 specifically. If I go ×2, which is default, right? It should achieve 120. No, it doesn't. Look. Whatever it is about the 5090, stick it on 4. Trust me, it just works. It just works. Right? How much performance do you think? Oh, how are you? You on the gym? Don't you post? No? Okay. Have a good one. How much performance gain do you think I'll see going from an 8 gig VRAM card to 16? Performance, not necessarily better rendering. You definitely have a lot more headspace when it comes to VRAM, right? Like a 4060 or a 5060 Ti, they're kind of the same. The only difference is there's more VRAM. You know what I mean? Yeah, FSR can work out pretty well. Yeah, FSR can work out pretty well. So what we're looking at here, right? We have our main thread. You have coherent, don't worry about that. Your graphics queue, download speed, rolling cache, terrain LOD, objects LOD, and then you'll see down here with our video memory as well, right? So we're using 11 gigs of 32 of VRAM. You're still using 11 gigs of VRAM, right? Now the settings that I just put in, I need to make another little tweak because I brought down my LODs. So 215. Was it 215 or 225? We'll throw in the extra few bits and let it stabilize. Yeah, that's pretty good. Now let's have a look at our sharpening. Or let's have a look at even going harder. So let's bring up the AMD to 100. Or Jesus, that goes to 200 now. Or if you have to have anti-aliasing on a 4K monitor, you don't have to have it on. Okay, so it is a sharper image. I mean, I'm looking at it. It's a sharper image for sure. But it is having an impact on the FPS and smoothness. See that little stutter there? Like, I'm not necessarily hunting for FPS. I want the thing to be smooth. I don't want any sort of pause or hiccup or any of that, right? So, put you back down to 50. Now, if we were to go into DLSS and we go quality, frame rate is good. It's very smooth. But you will get a bit of ghosting. But it's very smooth, like it's ridiculously smooth. No, that's the thing. You don't need your texture set to ultra. That's my point. Like, you can't tell the difference. It just uses more. My textures are set to high. You know what I mean? You can go quality, performance, or auto. Ultra performance. Like, I've told the system, hey, lock this thing to 120. It's succeeding. It's into the friggin' atmosphere she goes. But you can see now, like, it's getting 150 frames or whatever, but like, it's not as sharp as it once was. It's not bad, but it's not as sharp as it once was. So, yeah, I can get all the extra FPS in the world, but you don't need it. On the Stream Deck, yeah, it's a plug-in, Gibbo. It's a plug-in. On the Stream Deck, plug-in, 100%. Look for GA Stream Deck profile over on flightsim.to. That's where you get it. It's good. It's very good. Right, so go back into TAA. And this will lock us back into 120. If you can't find it, I'll jump into it. And my last little trick, just to see how will FrameGen render 8K. Jesus. That's crazy. Nearly 90 FPS in 8K. The CPU hates me at the moment. Yeah. But like, look at the ghosting. It's like, Jesus. You don't see much difference? Ah, there's a difference. Maybe from what the stream is picking up, but like, no, there's a huge difference. It's almost too much. It starts showing gaps of the aircraft, you know what I mean? Textures don't look like textures anymore. Now, why you'd ever want to do that? Making a trailer, maybe? Oh. Right, calm it all down now, Bijani. That to me is striking the best balance. It's smooth, it's predictable, and that's what I go for. Alright. Are we happy enough? It's fairly well balanced. I have a 46% load on a CPU and an 86 load on the GPU. It's running efficiently. Alright. So, that be that. Advanced. Debug. Turn off. Exit dev. 8K is the holy, or 8K is the holy grail, isn't it? After the human retina can see any difference, or I read somewhere trying to sell me something 8K. Yeah. I don't know. I think like you can achieve far better visuals with refresh rate.
Oh, behave.
Maybe than you know, resolution. You know what I mean? Exhaust, thank you very much indeed. Yeah, this will be on YouTube, buddy. This will be on YouTube. Right, so where are we with me noties? Render scale is all fine. Terrain LOD is fine. Shadows, we did all those. Flow and chase plane. Right, flow. Hello, flow. I use flow. This is from Parallel 42. If you're on the PC, you need to have flow. There's no nice way of saying it. Just get flow. Basically, it's a UI replacement rather than using the top menu bar, and you can access loads of stuff inside of flow. All right. So your time, for example, look at the control you have over changing the time of day, or even the month of the year, or bring it back down, or you can pause time. Flow is just smart. It's brilliant, right? Weather, when we get an idea of what's happening based on custom weather, or from straight in here, we can go into live weather. Right? Not yet, Linny. Not yet. Shortcuts to GSX, FS Realistic if we want to use it. Your camera position. So Flow will look at like default cameras, but if you mix this in with chase plane, it'll do chase plane as well. All right. Engine held 3%. Oh yeah, sure. Didn't I crash it yesterday? Yeah, I crashed my plane yesterday, right? Do you find the flow causes FPS hits? No, I don't think so. FPS is running there 120. Oh. What's better with flow? Have a look at this. If I wanted to go into the default menu system and open up the menu for the weather, look what happens to the sky. See that pause? That's paused the sim. It pauses the sim loading the menu. Like, it's a friggin' disaster. It loads so hard, it actually interrupts the flight for a second. Because it's loading this UI. The UI is so terribly shit, like, it's just, what did they do? How did they manage that? If you would just, like, an option, and it pauses the sim. You put that into contrast with flow. Did it pause once? Is there any delay? Nada. Nothing. Okay, but if I use this menu, the whole sim stutters and pauses. It's like, how did they, right? And it's the same with any menu you try and grab inside the default menu system. It's just not good, like. It's not optimized. It's, you know. Mouse movement also brings back the FPS. We always had to do for this game, you know. Flow is grand. It's brilliant. And you've so many options here when it comes to it. The next one then is chase plane, because this is just better than the camera system. Same story again. You know, you want to move around, even the drone camera, you know, anything that can make your simulator look good. It's a no-brainer. Chase plane is excellent. Oh, Jesus, there's a new experimental version. What did you change? I'm not going to do that now. Might be Sim Beta 4. Ah, yeah. Wasn't there an issue with flow in the G3000 Satec Vision recently? I'm not sure. I'm unsure. Like, both flow and chase plane, they are new and cutting edge for 2024. You know. Matt, there's no link for it, unfortunately. If you had WB Sim aircraft already, you can get it working in 2024, but it's not for sale anymore. So I need to find out from Howard. you know. Flow and chase plane don't work in Sim Update 5. That, well, there's a new experimental build, Roy. That might fix that, you know. So flow and chase plane, like a tutorial on how to use it, they come built with their own tutorials, right? They're very straightforward. Only after you start using them when you learn how they work. Flow, for example, right? You click on a spot on the wheel, it brings you into the menu, into the editor. You can change the background skin. You can throw in whatever little widgets you want, right? An example might be, okay, electrical. Hey, look, here's a battery reset, or here's a toggles AV. Like, you can see all these extra options you have. Game servers, right? Aircraft lights. Like, there's tons of pre-built widgets in here that you just pop into a little corner of your wheel. And when they're in there, then, you know, you go into your wheel and you say, hey, I want this one, or hey, I want that one. You know what I mean? Does chase plane work in VOR? Yeah. How do you get FSR into it? You can get anything into it. So, watch this. Open your wheel, find an empty spot, and what you do, scroll down, and you're looking for the option that says MSFS. See MSFS panels? If you click on that, that's where you get all your stuff. That could be active sky, it could be GSX, on air, it could be chase plane, typical weather, say intentions, FS realistic, all of that. You click it, you drag it, you drop it. Alright? FX, yeah, that's weird, man, that's weird. Captain Sickbag is back. Someone lured me away as they had a couple of pints lined up for me. You can't turn things like that down, especially on a Thursday. Hope you at the Janie. You're very welcome back. So that's how you do it. I at the moment, Flow is designed to replace this menu bar. I leave it on for the moment because there's a bug that can happen every now and again. They will fix it, but I just leave that open. All right. So that be Flow and chase plane. I have a video on chase plane, I think, or was that a video on Flow? It was a video on Flow I did. I have a video on Flow. You can have a look at it. It's very, very good. It's excellent, in fact. Excellent, right? Now, where was I at? We're nearly there. Let's have a look. Wasom. We'll talk about Wasom for the minute, because Wasom seems to be the bane of many people's lives. What is Wasom? Does anyone know what WebAssembly is? What it actually does? Do you hear that Shannon's runway 0624 is going to 0523? It is. D White, it surely is. Headaches. Yes, headaches. Well, interesting that Lord Freeze says it's a headache, because effectively it's a sandbox designed for creators to use their stuff. Ruins all your stuff. So WebAssembly, it's a low-level binary, usually C++ format, which was designed to run code inside of Xbox. That's all it is. That's what it does. So the Wasom layer allows complex aircraft systems to exist safely inside of the sim. And what do they mean by that? But they can't access critical parts of your PC. Years ago, back in the day, they didn't use Wasom. Yeah, what they mean by safely, put it this way, right? Prior to using WebAssembly, they would have used DLL injection, which had direct memory access to your hardware. They could make system-wide changes, and the performance sucked. Right? It's a portable, low-level binary instruction format designed to run code at near-native speed in a safe sandbox environment. Yeah, that's pretty much it, early dev. That's pretty much it, right? So when people say, you know, Wasom shagged, well, it's not. It's a little sandbox, and it's the most basic thing. Microsoft can't have software working that can access your hardware outside of the sim. That's why Xbox doesn't allow that. That's why you have WebAssembly, right? Yeah, Roy said the very same thing. It's all right, Roy. We saw your answer as well. But that's effectively what it is. Wasom or WebAssembly is a portable binary instruction format designed to run code efficiently on the web and other environments. Effectively, it allows them to run it inside of Xbox, right? So why is it needed? Well, before, they used to use this DLL injection stuff, which, you know, sounds great, but you can't have stuff making changes to your hardware or accessing kind of malware, and that's what they used to do. Microsoft VATSIM moved to Wasom because, well, it increases security, it standardizes system simulation, it allows for the marketplace encryption, and it keeps third-party code isolated. And the important thing here is, lads, people will say, oh, why do we need Wasom? You need it. That's the infrastructure. But it's set up in such a way, instead of crashing your entire sim, it just crashes the code. The sim can live on. And that's a huge thing. If you didn't have WebAssembly there, or Wasom, well then, sure, the add-on would break your sim. It would crash to desktop way more often. So at least what WebAssembly does, it'll say, right, well, the module has failed. Keep the sim running. You know, I've no avionics. Quick, land, save what you need to save, and then get out of there. That's the idea behind it, right? That is the idea behind it. I'm pretty sure the problem we get is mostly plain dev's code or Microsoft's code being unstable. 8 times out of 10, I say it's a third-party developer, right? 1 time out of 10 is the user, and then 1 time out of 10 is the sim. The sim isn't really doing anything with it. It's only a sandbox. Can't do much with it, right? It can corrupt it. That can happen, right? It is code. But just to explain what it is, it's not like it has no special computing power. It's basically a sandbox in which their code can run safely. Because if you didn't have it, as I say, it would have been it would crash your sim. So the idea being is, if you do get a Wasom crash, you know, land the plane, save it, and then get out of there. You know what I mean? So what can we do about it? The main stuff that runs on Wasom, at least to us that we see, would be a complex airliner. Phoenix, PMDG, high fidelity stuff, right? The reason why it's sandbox, just to explain, it can't access your system memory freely. It depends entirely on Microsoft's SDK. It is sensitive to SDK changes. It has memory limits, and it can be affected by sim updates. So how does a Wasom crash occur? One of 3 layers: an aircraft code, a flight sim SDK layer, or a simulator runtime layer, right? If it's a third-party developer fault, aircraft code has a memory leak, the dev mishandled an SDK call, that happens all the time, the aircraft wasn't updated after a sim update, you have an existing mod that's conflicting with the aircraft, then the Wasom crash is on the developer, right? Scenario 2 would be an SDK or the sim, and that's where Asobo would make changes to the SDK, memory allocation behavior changes, API behavior changes, the runtime that they use with Wasom changes, or the marketplace encryption layer changes. Now, none of these change until there's a sim update. You know what I mean? Wasom should relieve the sim from calculating the code. It's actually a container. If that isn't assembled well, it crashes or going into an unrecoverable loop. Murph, SimBrief causes it too. I was able to replicate it. Wait now. Well, so SimBrief mightn't be the root cause. It's PMDG, and when it's injecting in something from SimBrief, it's crashing the Wasom module. But it needs to be fed. We need to feed this back to PMDG, not to Microsoft. It's a sandbox. They didn't do anything. They just built. And WebAssembly own it, right? So it's just a sandbox. It's not. It technically isn't a Microsoft problem. Only certain airports. Yeah. It's a third-party developer problem. PMDG, lads, yeah, you an issue here. And let them tell you what they want. But it's their problem. Unless Microsoft have changed the SDK or they've changed the version of Wasom, it's on PMDG, right? And if they tell you it's not on them, it is on them. I'm telling you it's on them. It's on them. Microsoft, like, think about it in this way. It's a sandbox to allow code to run safely without interfering with other things. So, right, here's a sandbox, right? You can run your stuff in here. The only way you can get it in the sim, it has to run in here. All right, okay. Oh, your module broke. Our module didn't break. Like, it you know what I mean? So, the last thing that could upset the Wasom module is the user. So, the developer, the sim, and the user. The user. What upsets Wasom? RAM. If your RAM is unstable, that has the ability to cause problems, right? If your XMP profile, especially that, if that's unstable, if your Wasom cache is corrupted, that can happen. If there are too many SimConnect apps running, right? It's battling over SimConnect, who gets the information? Or if your page file is disabled. Now here's a question for the Dougal. Dougal, do you have your page file disabled by any chance? Or the user could be unstable as well. Yeah. So your page file is not disabled. And what about RAM in terms of XMP profiles? Page file is okay. Okay. It was a shot in the dark. The other thing then could be a conflicting add-on. Another add-on is conflicting it. The crash originates outside of the environment. It's on the user, right? So Wasom is sensitive to memory stability, the SDK, and also a clean file structure, right? So what can we do to figure it out, right? Let's see. You have the aircraft Wasom module. That's in the developer file. We can delete that. We can move it, right? Or you could have the encrypted Wasom file, which lives inside the OneStore folder. There's two locations for Wasom files, right? The most common issue is with the runtime cache. Now, to find a runtime cache for a Wasom file, you go into application, all this jazz, right? We go into local cache. Users, Murph, app data, local, packages, limitless, local cache, packages, no, local cache packages. There's nothing there, no. Where is me Wasom? Local state, Wasom. Local state, Wasom. 2020 aircraft, 2024 aircraft. This is the cache locations for all the Wasom files. So usually if you have a problem, you delete the Wasom folder because data could get corrupted. Yeah. You can relocate the page file to another and faster drive, as far as I know. You could do. Yeah. If a Sobel created Wasom related changes, then it crashes. I compared always with an incompatible PHP version change with a single character change. Has that happened, Roy? Yeah, never. Yeah, don't disable your page file. Make sure your page file is running. If you want to know where that is, how do we find the page file? Page file? Page file, Murph. Where's page file again? It's under system memory, isn't it? We'll find it in control panel. Let's have a look. System and security, hardware and sound. Where did we find the page file? Virtual memory. Yeah, where did we get that again? Virtual memory. Goose, good to see it. Advanced system properties. Man. Advanced system settings. Here we go. So, performance, startup recovery, visual effects, virtual memory. Performance, visual effects, advanced, virtual memory. This is where it is. A paging file is an area on the hard disk where Windows uses as if it was RAM. System managed. Automatically managing profile or paging size for all drives. Mine's on system managed. I just let it do the stuff itself. Right? So make sure that that's on. And people will tell you, Jesus, you don't want that on an NVM2 or an SSD. Just leave it on. You need it on. Like, there are devices that need it, you know? Yeah, Windows 10 and 11, they actually do a pretty good job at this. You used to be able to set it yourself. Basically, I think you multiply it or you divide it by 4 by your RAM size, divided by 4 or something. I think that was the way we used to do it, but yeah. So yeah, make sure that that's turned on. Right, that's important. But anyway, the Wasom files, that's where they live, right? So if you're having an issue with a particular module, delete its Wasom folder, relaunch the sim, it'll build a new one, right? If it's still not right after that, you're going to have to look for the symptoms. How to look for symptoms in a flight sim: launch it in its vanilla state with just that add-on you're trying to test. If the problem doesn't occur, you've now kind of highlighted, okay, well, there's something else causing this issue, another aircraft. If it still happens and you're in a vanilla state, onto PMDG, lads, yeah, problem. All right. You might find additional information in the event viewer. You might. It could tell you, yeah, WebAssembly runtime error, right? You might do. It could show you a VC runtime as well. All right. So you can delete the folder, launch the sim, check the aircraft, you know. The only drawback to this is to reset to default after a Windows update. Pretty much. There's no way to kind of verify Wasom files. Make sure your aircraft is up to date. Make sure you're patching it with the latest and greatest, you know. Also, you know, if you want to have a real clean diagnostic testbed for your sim, delete the Wasom cache, rolling cache, run your aircraft on vanilla, right? Make sure your page file is on, check your RAM stability. But again, like, if your RAM is working, you'll know if your RAM isn't working, because you won't just have issues in Microsoft Flight Sim. You'll have issues across the board, lads. There's going to be issues there. Do you know what I mean? So, like, yeah, I wouldn't worry about them too much, you know? Jesus, we were supposed to do an awful lot about navigation. We still have our flight to brief for tonight. Jesus, we'll be here for a while yet. Right. So that's a setup configuration of the sim. It's a little bit drawn out. I might try and edit this down into a video to make it easier to watch rather than listening to me harp on for 3.5 hours. But I don't know. Maybe you learned something. I've learned something. Yeah, it used to be 1.5 times your RAM. Good man, Steve. Yeah. But it's Roy does absolute mad experimental stuff. Did you check out the website, Murph? Which one, Goose? Roy does very experimental stuff with hardware, very interesting. And Roy, I'm delighted that you know, take one for the team and report your findings. But it's pretty cool. You have learned something. Okay, great. Virtual Pilot, yeah, I'll put together Crotty put together a phenomenal list, so you know, and some great tips in that. But yeah, hang on now. Where is this now? Oh, I did, Goose. Yeah. Oh, I did. They're shocking. Uniform Goose. They're shocking. But yeah. It's all good to refresh the settings needed. Okay, sweet. All is really helpful. And like, again, be careful, lads. AI is great to help you along. Do not take AI, you know, as the legit way on how to. It's great for troubleshooting, but in terms of giving you the fixes, it is not. It might get there, but it's not always going to have the right answers. Be careful using AI. What we've covered here today should get you pretty much, you know, on the ball when it comes to getting your settings right, where you're installing it, what sort of a drive you're putting it on, turning off certain Windows settings, indexing and all this sort of jazz. You know, try and use a bit of common sense. Offload the apps, background apps. Just don't have web browsers and Discord and cloud saves running on your PC when you're simming. Offload them onto other equipment like a tablet, this kind of stuff, right? But yeah, you've been editing it through the stream as well. Oh, good man. Brilliant. I'll put me doc in the Discord later. Yeah, deadly. Just lift off the gadget we found with the thing with the yoke, right? I learned the hard way, expensive hard way during the road, right? But yeah, Murph, heads up. I think your left frame gen is on 4 instead of 2. Yeah, it's okay. I leave it for a 5090 frame gen 4 is the absolute, you know, the mutt's nuts, the cat's pajamas, right? You know what I mean? It's brilliant. Frame gen 2 on a 5090, frame gen 4, it loves it. Suits you, sir. It just loves it. So we'll leave it on that, right? We'll delve more into these settings again. I think these Thursday streams, yeah, I want to get into flight, into aviation stuff, right? But I think it's important that we kind of, you know, have a day dedicated to, you know, the sim, be it with hardware settings, software settings, because it's great for new people coming in. They'll learn, right? But also for folks who are using this equipment for quite some time and they're like, oh, Jesus, I never checked that in a while. Or it could be just something so obvious it's actually hidden. Do you know what I mean? But yeah. Lear, good to see you. Rolling cache path was coming up as invalid, so I made a new folder and the documents seem to work. Yeah, that'll work as well, Zard. There's a couple of different ways in which you can do it. You can do it from inside the sim. Well, you can do it all from inside the sim. You know? There are a couple of ways in which you can do it. Like there's options in the sim, you know. But what we're going to have a quick look at now, we're going to have a quick look at some VOR. I want to go over some very high frequency omnidirectional range navigation. We probably won't get a chance to test fly it today, but I do have a video, you crazy people. And we're going to watch this video because it's from none other than the King Schools, ladies and gentlemen. It's about a 10-minute video and we're just going to talk about VOR navigation. Right? Because this is something we should all know. It is excellent to fly VOR navigation. It's just brilliant. Now, the King Schools, Martha and John, these are excellent, right? I've learned tons of watching their stuff. So I have a video we're going to watch and it's all about VOR navigation. This is basically stations on the ground that are transmitting on a specific frequency and we can get a bearing to said frequency, right? We've Rod Machado stuff here as well, you know. But there is a VATSIM stream, so we'll do our VATSIM planning after this one, all right? So any questions so far? Are we all good? You've met them before? Nice. Are you bringing out the video player? Yeah, that's what it's like, Lear. Quiet now, you all get to watch a video. Where is this now? Elgato. Program files. Elgato. Volume. I need to put this on a button. Right. So we need to turn down the sim and we're going to watch one of these. So VOR navigation, and we'll have a chat about this in a few moments as well. All right. Let's do the thing with the yoke.
Now, after all of this discussion, let's see how you'd use your VOR in your airplane to know where you are. Well, when you look inside your airplane, you'll find your VOR receiver, and the first thing you do is tune in the frequency you want to use, and if it's a flip-flop type like this, you transfer it to make sure the frequency you tuned is active. So the first thing you need to do to use a VOR is tune in the proper frequency. Then identify the VOR Morse code so you know that it's the right station position and it's suitable for navigation. Then you take a look at your Omni bearing selector, or OBS for short, or your VOR indicator, and then you can rotate the Omni bearing selector to set different radials or courses here. And in this particular case, we've set in about 332 degrees in the OBS. So you first tune in the frequency, then you set the proper radial in the OBS, then you read the indicator over here. It's called a flag, and it can say to, from, or it could not say anything, and that'd either be off or the FAA calls that neutral. In this case, it says to. And then you'd look at your needle. The needle could either be left or right or a centered needle. In this particular case, we have an almost centered needle, but you could have either left or right or whatever. So let's review this one more time. If you want to use a VOR, you tune in the frequency on the navigation receiver, you set the radial in your OBS, you observe the to from indicator, and you observe your CDI needle, which should either be left or right or center. Now we have a drawing that I think will be very, very helpful to you. You'll find this drawing at the end of the Legends and Figures on the main menu. But let's take a look right now to figure out how it works. And you can use this drawing with an aeronautical chart as a way of showing what your VOR would read in various situations. So we'll show you how to read it in just a few minutes. But by the way, they will not let you carry this piece of paper into the test. However, you and I are going to memorize it right now. So when you get to the test, all you have to do is sit down and draw this drawing out on a piece of paper, because they will give you a piece of paper and a pencil. So let's take a look at this very, very helpful drawing. So first of all, let's figure it out. First thing you do is draw a little circle in the center of the piece of paper and put the letters VOR in the circle. That represents, are you ready for this? The VOR. Then you draw an arrow from the bottom of the piece of paper up through the VOR, going out the top, and have an arrow saying OBS. And that, of course, represents what you have set in the OBS. Then you make a crossing line going from the right to the left, right through the center of it, and that gives you 4 quadrants. So here you have your 4 quadrants. In the right quadrants, you'll have left needles like so. In the left quadrants, you'll have right needles like so. And up here, it'll say from, and down here it says to. And so this tells you where you are by what it's going to read. Now let's take a look, if you will, at this figure right here, and take a look at Sulphur Springs VOR DME. And I want to show you how this VOR piece of paper we just talked about can be a great help to you. Let's assume you want to tune in the 030 degree radial in your OBS. Well, what you do is you put your piece of paper on the VOR like so, and then rotate the OBS or the arrow until it goes 030. Now, 030 is the direction you're flying the airplane. You always set in the OBS the direction you're flying the airplane. So if you're down here flying 030 to the station, it would read to and a centered needle. Now let's cover an important distinction. That's the distinction between the radial you're on and what you might have set in the OBS. In many cases, they will be different. As you remember, the word radial refers to where you are from the station. So if you're on the 210 degree radial, you would be down here. But even though you're on the 210 degree radial, if you want to fly to the station, you'd set 030 in the OBS. And because you're using the VOR to track a course, you always set in the OBS the direction the airplane is flying. So you'd be here, the VOR would read 030 in the OBS and 2 and a centered needle. Now, if you got a little bit off to the right, it would be 2 and a left-hand needle. Go a little bit to the left, and it would be 2 and a right needle. When you cross the VOR, it will read neutral. And when you pass the VOR, it will read a from indication. Over here, it would be from and a left-hand needle, and over here, it would be from and a right-hand needle. And up here, you're on the 030 degree radial if you're up here. And then you're flying in this particular direction, 030. And so that's how you would use this piece of paper to help you out. Now let's take a look at this figure, and let's look at some questions they're going to ask you about tracking a course. In this case, we'll be tracking a course from way down here at Mercer County Airport to way up here at Minot Vortac. Way up there we go, Minot Vortac. And by the way, the Vortac is located right on the airport. There's that little tiny dot there showing you it's on the airport. And over here to the left is the box with the VOR information that tells us actually this is a Vortac. Now let me ask you a question. If you flew from down here to up here, would you be flying roughly north or roughly south? The answer is you're going to be flying roughly north. So the number you'd put in the OBS would be roughly north. Now, if you could continue your line on beyond Minot Vortex and read off the compass rose up here, you would, but the FAA didn't make that much chart available to you, so you cannot do that. So what you have to do is read down here off the compass rose, and I get 179 degrees down here. Now, we're going to be actually flying the reciprocal of that, so you add 180 degrees, and what you would have to set in your OBS then would be 359 degrees. Remember, you always put in the OBS the direction the airplane is flying. Now, you're going to be flying roughly north, so it would be 359 degrees in the OBS. Now, they will make available an answer to you of 179 degrees. That would not be a correct answer because that would have you flying roughly south. You're flying roughly north. Now here is a dirty, dirty trick. They're also going to make available an answer to you of 001 degrees. That means you'd have to read 181 down here. That's the wrong answer because we're actually reading 179 down here. The correct answer is 359 degrees set in your OBS. Can you believe they're asking you to read this within 2 degrees? So the correct answer is you're flying north and you'd set in your OBS about 359 degrees. And you've got it right. Now let's do another one, and to do that, let's take a look at this chart. And let's you and I make a direct flight on this figure. We're going to go from an airport called Hampton-Varnville Airport, which is right there. And then we're going to go this direction. And what is that direction? Roughly north or roughly south? Well, that's roughly south. We're going down here to Savannah Vortex. So here's Savannah Vortex. And once again, you look down here, and if you could, you'd read what you'd set in the OBS down here, but they don't make enough chart available to you, so you can't read off the compass rose down here. But they're going to ask you, what would you set in your OBS to do that? Well, we're going to have to take a look up here and read this and add or subtract 180 degrees, whatever the case is easier. In this case, we'll add 180 degrees. So in this particular case, we're flying south, and I get 016 degrees. I add 180 degrees, and I get 196 degrees. So if you're flying this trip from north to south and you wanted to use your VOR for navigation, what would you set in the OBS? And the correct answer is you'd set 196 degrees in the OBS. By the way, always set in the OBS the direction you're flying the airplane. So if you're flying south, you'd put south in the OBS. If you're flying north, you'd put north in the OBS. In this case, you'd put south in the OBS. Let's do one last one of these, and to do that we'll use this chart. And we're flying from over here at Majors Airport, and we're going to be flying over in this direction right here at Equipment VOR DME over here. Now, the symbol tells you this is a VOR DME, but let me ask you a question. On this trip, would you be flying northwest or roughly southeast? And the answer is you're flying roughly southeast. So what would you set in your OBS? Well, of course, they don't leave room over here to look it up on the compass rose, so you're going to have to use the reciprocal. So you go over here and I get 280 degrees. You subtract 180 degrees, and son of a gun, I get about 100 degrees, and that's what we would set in your OBS. So what would you set in your OBS for this trip? You'd set in 100 degrees.
Right. Now, I will say this. The King's Schools, have a look at their website. Have a look at their YouTube videos. These are excellent. The information King's Schools have out there, and a lot of it is free, right? They do paid ground school courses, and yet they're characters, of course they are. These were actually in one of the Microsoft flight sims of yesteryear, where you got to do your flight training. You would learn a lot from the King's Schools, and then you would join Rod Machado in the aircraft, and he was your pilot instructor, right? And anyone who's used the older flight sims, you remember these. They were excellent, right? There is absolutely tons of information available online. I recommend folks like the King's Schools, Rod Machado definitely, Angle of Attack is another one. There's loads of resources in which you can kind of learn all of this stuff. But we don't need to worry too much about this in the simulation world. We're not getting tested by the FAA, but we need to understand how these how the rose needle works. How do we get bearings? What's our heading going to be? What is he talking about OBS? What is a VHF? They're the things we're interested in learning, right? So to start off, well, a VHF, a VOR, it's VHF omnidirectional range. If you're using the VOR correctly, then the dot in the center is your aeroplane on your OBS, or we call it a VOR indicator, right? It's very high frequency, omnidirectional range, meaning you could have a non-directional beacon, right? Mr. TPHI, prepare yourself. A non-directional beacon. So how this works is, let's call that our VOR, right? Or let's just call that our beacon. A non-directional beacon is a fixed beacon. It's there's no radials, there's no track reciprocals, there's nothing. It's just a beacon, right? Think of it as like a beacon light on a crane or on the top of a building. Visualize that. It's a light blinking on a building, right? Think of VOR like a lighthouse. It's sending out a signal, a light, right, on a 360-degree variable. Each station, be it an NDB or a VOR, well, they have their own radio frequency called a nav frequency or navigation frequency, right? A non-directional beacon. It's more like an antenna. Yeah, so that's better. A light flashing on top of an aerial. There's no traversing to it, right? But anyway, we're focusing here on a VOR. The VOR has the center of the station, right? It has the center of the station, and what it's doing, it's sending out a signal on all radials of 360 degrees, right? And the idea being is your equipment inside the aircraft, right, is able to detect what direction it is to or from that station. It's pretty cool when you do this, right? Flying VORs, it's savage fun. Now, you can get, you'll often hear it said VOR DME. Does anyone know what DME stands for? DME? Have you ever heard that before? Have a stab at it if you're not sure. So a VOR and DME. Distance measuring equipment. Kind of sounds strange. It's like, what? But basically, it will also give you information on that frequency to say how far you are to or from a particular nav aid, right? So our VOR is transmitting on a frequency, and whatever that frequency is, let's say, I don't know, it's 11. Why is that writing like that? Let's say it's, 11. I don't know what's a VOR frequency, Murph. 116.95. Right, that's the frequency. Okay, and on the chart or on your instrument, you'll have what's called the flag. And the flag, as John said there, it'll either have an arrow that says to, which means you're going towards that station, or it'll say from, or FR, and that means you're moving from that station. All right. And then if you have a flag, it's not working. All right. So the impossible phase, good man yourself. What we can do in the sim, well, Microsoft Flight Sim has included VOR stations in which we can navigate by using VOR. You can see them on the chart, so we can plan our route based on VOR to VOR navigation. And this was the mainstay. Before GPS, this is how you navigated. Instrument, anyway, right? So a couple of things you need to know. Each VOR station has an identifier, and the identifier is using Morse code. Dot, dash, dot, dot, dash, this kind of crack. And they'll have their own unique identifier. So we need to look at the chart and say, right, I want to make sure I'm tuned into the correct facility. Therefore, I'll double check. The instruments line up. The radio says what a radio does. I need to make sure that the Morse code identifier is also correct. Now, with modern avionics, it'll auto-check this one for you, right? The Garmin units do a great job on this. But as a pilot, you need to know, and the fact that it's simulated in Microsoft Flight Sim and X-Plane, it's fun for us to go off and learn it, right? So that's a VOR. Now, if you want to navigate by VOR, the video I just showed you shows you how to do it. You point your airplane in the direction in which you're flying, you're going to get then the reading, which is either, your track towards, right, or your radial from, all right? And there's information here that we can get. CDI is your course deviation indicator. That's letting you know where you're right or left to or from, right? But if we come over here now to Sky Vector, or you can use Navigraph, whatever you find easy. We're on the ground here at CAGS, which is Augusta Regional, right? So we're going to zoom in here. And if we look on the chart, we can see, well, hang on a second now, there's a class of airspace here, right? Impulse Simulations in with the raid. Good to see you, buddy. Very happy Thursday. How goes the scenery creation? You're very welcome in, man. Hope you're having a great day. Welcome in, Raiders. We're here doing some VOR training briefly, and then we're going to do our briefing for our VATSIM flight. All right. So we'll do this next week in more detail. But if we're going to take off from Augusta, well, we want to find a VOR, and we can find VORs relatively simple. They'll have this arc. We'll see. Well, there's a VORTAC. Okay. So it's VOR and a TACAN. Or we can move across somewhere else just to find a very straightforward VOR area, right? So we could tune into this VOR, or we can go further afield. Now, when it comes to VORs, their signal degradation is real because it could be the case that there's terrain blocking you. Rare enough weather will impact, but it can. So let's say, for example, we want to fly over to here, the Athens VOR. Right, and we can see it in here. So if I was to right click, well, give us the Athens VOR. It's 116.905. So if I want to have a look at that VOR station, right, well, I can see, well, where's the information about the VOR? We just have to look at our chart here to get a better idea, right? Here we go. So it's a VOR DME. So there's distance measuring. It's going to be on 116.95. And this is where we can see the Morse code identifier. So it should sound like... That's what it should do. Dot, dash, dot, 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 dash, dot, right? So if we were to tune that frequency into our radios, into our nav radio in the plane, 116.905, it means once we get airborne, we probably won't pick it up until we're airborne because, you're looking, there's obstacles in the way, trees, buildings, mountains. So once you get airborne, you should be able to pick it up. Now, if we are navigating, well, we've more than just this one single VOR. We can piggyback on an outbound VOR, which is, there should be one here. There kind of is. So here's a different one, right? This is, we can use this for our ADF, automatic direction finder. That's a non-directional beacon, 385. It has a Morse code, right? But I imagine there is, let me see, there's Augusta. There's a notice to air mission. Let's see here now. I'm sure there's a frequency in here buried somewhere. That's the airport. So there's a Colliers has a TACAN here. Okay. So Augusta, Daniel, and then we see Colliers, which is up here. Look. We don't actually need that because that's going to take us up in an airway. Colliers. So we could fly to this one, 113.9er. So we could say, right, fly me up the road here. We're going to go up to the Athens VOR, but on our way, let's go via Colliers. Now we have a bit of a flight plan to do. We could go on to low frequency. This will show you the different VOR stations. So when we take off, we can say, okay, well, we're going to be tracking towards the Collier VOR. Once we get to there, it's going to be a left turn, and we want to be tracking inwards now to the Athens VOR. All right. Now, one thing you have to be careful, and Vex, yeah, great point. These are not all set to, north up, map up. You need to check to see on the VOR where is north, because they slightly change, right? So, for example, if we're looking at here, well, north isn't actually directly north on the map. It's slightly off to one side. Look at that. So that's why you'd have to kind of pivot it, because it's following magnetic north, right? Or it may not be following. It could be true north. So these are things you just need to check out. So where you'll see it'll sometimes give you the bearing, or it'll give you the needle, right? Now, if we were to say, well, look, hang on, is there another VOR we can go? Well, if we're going up this neck of the woods, of course there is. There's loads of them. There's tons of VORs, right? They'll eventually turn them off, but right now we're okay. There's attack. With a VOR over here, look, or it's attack as well. What about something further down the road? Yeah, we got stuff down here, right? You get the idea. It depends on what I prefer using VFR charts for this, but you can go IFR charts as well. So before you know it, well, there's a flight we could technically do without having to look out the window, because we're going to track towards one station, and then when we get to that station, we'll be going to the next one. Now, because we don't have DME here, how would we know in the airplane when we reach this? If there's no DME, how are we going to know? Well, we can set timings. We can also have a look at the instruments, because, well, it's going to, once we fly over the station, it's going to reset and show us the opposite direction, your flags to or from. But you're going to have a second nav frequency. You have two nav frequencies on your aircraft, a nav 1 and a nav 2. So you could, for instance, be following nav 1, which is set to Collier, but meanwhile you're tracking nav 2. And once you get the right bearing of nav 2, which is going to be, if you're heading inbound on this radial coming in, you're on a heading, or you're going to be heading roughly 280. So when the needle lines up on your nav 2 for 280, I'm at that point, now I turn. Makes sense? So we'll spend a bit of time next week flying some VOR routes. If you have any suggestions or ideas, let us know on Discord, and we'll build up a bit of a flight route together. We'll do some flying, and we'll have the weather, visibility against us, knowing that we can't look on the ground to see where we're going. We have to follow our instruments. All right? It's a cool way to go flying using VORs. And where today, everything's by GPS and, all the different nav aids and waypoints. That's all grand. But VOR, especially for general aviation, it's a lot of fun, because you can be tracking different VOR stations. You can fly VOR to VOR to VOR. And if you're in some of the older aircraft, you have to go that way anyway. All right? There, Digital Merc flew the F-28 from Amsterdam to Greensboro, 7 legs, only VOR, and dead reckoning. Brilliant. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. All right. So that's the story with that. We will get back into more of this next week. What we're going to have a quick look at now is our VATSIM flight for this evening. So we're flying from Dublin and we're going to Brussels. Now, I do have some Brussels scenery loaded. I hope it's Airsoft's. I won't see it there. Where will I see it? It'll be in the sim. So we'll open up our sim brief dispatch, and we're also going to open up Ventu Sky, right? So let's get the weather for today out of Dublin. So we're going to be taking off at 8 o'clock this evening. Temperature 5-6 degrees over to Brussels. Yeah, something similar. Let's have a look at the wind. So the wind speed on the ground, right? So we're going to be departing from the 2.8s, most likely, right? And we get into Brussels. It's a slightly different story. Kind of say 10 o'clock or that. We'll see what way the winds are. Now, wind speed at altitude, right? We're going to get a lovely tailwind after takeoff. Lovely tailwind, and all will be well in the realm. Where in the name of Jesus am I? So when we take off out of Dublin, and as we're tracking towards Brussels, there's a savage tailwind. Then it'll turn into a savage crosswind. But at that stage, we're going to be descending. All right. Cloud cover is going to be important. Dublin at the moment. Tons of cloud, and come this evening, tons of cloud. Brussels, we might be lucky. There might be a break in the cloud. Precip, there is rain on the way. So in Dublin, time of departure, actually okay. Brussels, we might get a bit of it, right? But there's going to be fog, so we want to watch for fog. Okay. So we have an idea of what's happening with the weather, right? It's raining in Dublin at the moment, but them showers seem to be clearing off. So we'll see what the story is there. So I'm happy enough with that. Our flight plan, now make sure, lads, when you're doing this, if you're flying with Firefly Air, make sure you have LRM locked into this flight with your call sign as well. That's important. We're going to be flying in a 737-8. 1 hour block. It's going to be over towards Liverpool, Manchester, down by Birmingham, over London, and then on into Brussels. Right, so we'll generate this flight. We're sitting here in the sim. We're going to exit the flight. And I want to jump into 737. Cargo. And Dublin I know is working, so we want to check out Brussels. I think I have Brussels installed. If I don't, I will do in a bit. Brussels. I'll know now when I zoom in. Yeah, we have it installed, right? Excellent. So we'll load in just to make sure all is well in the realm. And this is where it gets important in terms of your scenery cache, your rolling cache. We want to pre-cache the area so we don't have any surprises later on. You know what I mean? And while that's loading, we'll go ahead and open up our Navigraph. Lovely. Okay, so we'll let the aircraft do its thing. And we'll bring Navigraph over. And we're going to import the flight from SimBrief. And it's going to be Dublin to Brussels. So we're expecting a departure out of runway 28 right at Dublin. All right. We've no departure, so it's going to be a non-standard departure. So we fly runway heading and then they'll divert us whatever direction. That's strange. We've no SIDS or stars. Why didn't it grab my departure? End deck. Two eight right. Should be the end deck, won't it? It's right at the top. Oh yeah. That's strange, but that didn't load in. Okay, so end deck. What are you? The end deck 3 Juliet departure. I'll do. It didn't load in me arrivals. That's so very strange. So let me see. Let's look at our arrival. The SID and star don't show in the sim. All right, okay, that makes sense. All right, okay, so we can do the Cock 9 arrival, basing it on this. We'll do an approach then. We're planning runway 7 left. There's a VOR or an RNAV. Go with the RNAV. Okay, so that's what we're going to plan. Altitude for today's flight is going to be flight level 330. Okay. So we want to have a look down here. Our most important thing is going to be that of our arrival, right? So, speed restrictions in place. Aircraft radar vector shall reduce speed max 250, 30 miles from above or when below 10,000. It's grand, fairly straightforward. Nothing to worry about there. Missed approach. Missed approach is important. If we get a missed, we're going to go to 800, turn left. Watch your speed, 185 max on a heading 014. Climb to 4,000 and continue as directed by ATC. Do not turn before map. Okay. So we're landing 07. Missed approach is up this way, 014. No turn before map, revert to conventional navigation. Interesting. Ah, no dark mode. Sorry, Dougal. Okay, so missed approach. Here's 07 left. At 800 feet, left turn, climb to 4,000, continue as directed. Okay. I'll check the rest of the sim brief links. Ah, no worries. We can add them in ourselves anyway, naughty. RNAV approach holding. Pilots unable to fly the RNP approach will advise ATC. Uncompensated barrow VNAV operations not allowed. It's all okay. Okay, so missed approach is fly the runway heading. Once you get to 800 feet, hang a left. And then ATC will tell us what to do. Worst case scenario, it'll be up to the Antwerp VOR and hold. But not before we get to map, wherever map is. MAP. Airport. We're planning 07 left into Brussels. And we're probably going to be parking, even though I'm cargo, we'll see for detail see parking stands. Apron 10. Okay, so we can... It'd be up this neck of the woods. Like, the military's down the other side. Oh, missed approach point. Ah, gotcha. Thank you, Malky. So map is the missed approach point. Don't turn before the missed approach point. Okay. So apron 9 is probably what we're looking for if we can. Or apron 10. Military apron. Military apron. Okay. Side voltage, good to see you, bud. Alright, well, happy enough with that. We'll see what way the weather goes later on. I'm planning, we'll see what happens with parking. Sure, you lads are probably going to go into maybe the North Terminal, right? Terminal 1. So I'm not too worried about that later on. Mr. Approach looks fairly straightforward. Scenery does work here as well. We'll have a quick rip around here just to be sure. Okay, so the North apron, that's what I was thinking. That's cargo. That's DHL, Lufthansa Technic. Who's up here now? Swissport, is it? Swissport, Schenker, or whoever. Right, okay. That'll do. Yeah, you can virtual pilot, yeah. Especially if you turn on your pilot mentor, they'll do all that for you as well. And then the military side down here. Yeah, it's ever grand. We should be grand. Big Owl Airport, this one, isn't it? Some stutters, but that's why we do this with photogrammetry. We're trying to load everything in first. Okay. Brussels from Brussels. Really like this airport, good fun. Yeah, it's pretty cool looking. Alright, so out of Dublin. Dublin's familiar territory, we shouldn't have to worry too much. So out of Dublin, over to Brussels as we fly over the UK. You parked your MD-11 on 964 2 days ago. Ooh, nice. Nice. Right, lads, that's going to do it for the Savo. We're back in just 5 hours' time when we're going to do this flight. I want to thank you all so very much indeed for tuning in. We will cover more on kind of setup and settings and all that kind of jazz, and I'm going to do X-Plane stuff soon as well. Just getting X-Plane set up because a few of you have been asking. But hopefully you found today helpful, right? If you've any issues with your sim, drop us a message over in Discord and just talk to our Discord community. Very knowledgeable bunch of lads. Well, thank you very much indeed. You're flying tonight, not in an Airbus. Right, right, lads, listen, thank you all so very, very much indeed. Have an awesome day. Thank you so much indeed for all the raids, and yeah, I'll be crossing the Atlantic in real life. Have a nice stream. 777, enjoy it, buddy, enjoy it. And right, we'll see you later on. 5 hours, there's your homework. You'll be grand. Right, we'll see you later. Good luck. Holy crap. Holy crap, holy crap, holy crap. We're going in. That's it. There's no turning back at this stage. Jesus, mind the bears.
Look at this big Aegis.
Oh no, we're into dying. Quick, get out. Oh no, we're Jesus. Oh, ooh.
You should be.
Do you need a hand?
No, I don't need it. Do I need a hand?
It's heavy, yeah. Jesus, Murph! What have you
For a warbird, it's one of the finest warbirds ever released in Microsoft Flight Simulator, considering you have the excellent work of Flying Iron. This thing, because of the extra features, because of the optimization, because of how well it looks and sounds, even flying this thing gives you an experience you probably haven't got already in the sim when it comes to flying a warbird. It feels heavy, it feels cumbersome, it behaves differently. And there's a lot of depth to it. It's a cracker. It's a masterpiece. Oh, I never did the thing, look. Into beta, reversers, flaps in. Get out of beta. Get out of the beta. Ah!